Coming to you live from Not the Dolby Theater. It's the Movie Changeup Podcast 2021 Award Season Preview. Basically, what we're going to do this episode is we got the award season coming out. So, kind of the whole premise of this episode is we're going to be breaking down the movies that we've seen that are probably going to get nominated. Some of them haven't come out yet. So, some of the ones like Nightmare Alley, we're not going to talk about. They haven't come out yet. We haven't seen them. We don't know what they're about. But a lot of them have come out. And we're going to talk about those. We're going to give you recommendations of, hey, these are the movies you should watch. So if you've been watching the Oscars the last few years and you're like, hey, I enjoy watching the Oscars. I like seeing what wins, but I've never seen any of these movies. I didn't know any of these movies existed until Oscar night or maybe until nominations. We're kind of here to give you a jump start on what to watch. A lot of these movies, because of COVID and whatnot, are currently streaming on apps you probably already have. So should be easy for you to get a lot of these movies we're going to talk about today. But I will kick it over to Johnny. I think, like most of our podcasts, I think this is probably your idea for us to do this. So, kind of, what are your thoughts overall this year in movies? Do you think it's been a good year for movies, a weak year for movies?
I've seen just under 40 movies that have come out this year, not including, like Judas and the Black Messiah is another one that we won't discuss today. That's technically 2021, but it was up for last year's Oscars, so we don't really have to discuss that for this year in terms of movies. But I think overall it's been a solid year. I think I've seen a lot of the really good ones recently. Basically, I saw Pig right when that came out, and that was amazing. And everything I saw after that was like fine up until like the last like month or so. Oscar season movies start coming out that are more interesting and more up my alley. So yeah, I actually haven't seen a lot of the big blockbusters. I feel like this year, but I think you guys have that mostly covered.
Yeah, Bobby, you kind of all of us, have mostly stuck to the blockbusters because of time and everything. So, how do you feel about the blockbuster situation this year?
Yeah, it was an interesting year because usually I'm more in the boat of Johnny, where I watch all the Oscar movies or all the small indies and stuff coming out, and just like you said, because of time, and it actually was easier to make time to go to the theater for me than it is to like sit down and watch it at home. It feels like so. Yeah, the blockbusters, it's been a mix. Some were really good, some were kind of disappointing, but there were some really good ones in there, and I think a couple of them that I saw are definitely going to be in the Oscar conversation, even if it's just for a couple categories. But something like Dune is for sure something that could cross over into the awards talk, and then one other one that Johnny got about 3 minutes into, I think could as well.
All right, and Tristan, you and Johnny both have like more. You watch more of the obscure movies, but I think you're more dialed into that arena. So are there any kind of strange movies that maybe you wouldn't recommend so much to a general audience, but that you think could get some big award nominations?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation. It's always interesting. You say, like, I'm dialed into that, and I kind of am, especially this year. I tried to be very dialed into, like, the Oscar predictions throughout the entire year, and there's always that question of, like, okay, is Spencer going to be too abstract for people to vote for a Best Picture? Is it going to be a very streamlined biopic? Is it not going to be? And that's kind of like the discussion going forward. So it's going to be really fun to see as those movies get wider released. Like Spencer, for instance, is one that I loved and I think could potentially be a Best Picture nominee, but I do think it breaks a lot of the biopic kind of norms in a way that I think might make it hard for it to win a nomination. So it'll be pretty interesting to get through this conversation. And yeah, I want to talk about some stuff that maybe won't get Oscar love, but I think probably deserves some Oscar love, like Pig. We'll get through Pig a little bit, but I also want to mention, too, that back in September, I went through every single category of the whole Oscars and predicted who was going to get nominated and who was going to win. So I have like a pretty baseless prediction of list of all of the different categories and who I thought was going to get nominated back in September. So as we're going through, I'm going to be checking that and seeing if I had any really off the rails kind of predictions. I was definitely having some high hopes for Dear Evan Hansen at that point still. So didn't pay out for that.
What awards did you think Space Jam: A New Legacy had a chance at getting?
Look, I mean, hopefully none. We'll look back and we'll forget that movie ever existed, but it'll be on Joe's top 10 probably.
It's currently sitting at 24 of the 25 movies I've watched this year, so there is hope for me yet.
Solid.
But who knows? Suicide Squad won an Oscar, so anything's possible. But yeah, I'll kick it off with Johnny. Is there a movie that sticks out for you that you want to talk about, bring up?
I mean, since we've mentioned it, we'll get right into it. Pig is one of the best movies I've seen, not only this year but in the last few years. I really enjoyed it. Um, it's going to be right up there as my top movie of the year. It's like one or two right now. It's going to be switching, but I just thought it was an excellent film with Nicolas Cage, and it kind of you can go into it thinking it's going to be this revenge film or like Nick Cage doing John Wick, because that's kind of what the trailer shows. But honestly, it's just a really great movie about loss and grief and how different people deal with it. And it's so well written and it's very emotional. It's like the John Wick if you replaced all the action with, human emotion. And that's, I don't know if it will get award love because it just didn't come out at the right time. I think if it had come out in the last couple of weeks, people would really be pushing for it to, be an Oscar type movie. But I hope it's not like Uncut Gems and doesn't get completely overlooked, because Nick Cage's performance is easily going to be in the top 5 of the year, no matter what else comes out. His performance, outside of like a couple others I've seen, his performance to me is like, so far it's my favorite, and I think it just stands so far above the rest of like most of the Oscar-y type movies that are coming out that I've seen. So that's the one that I don't know, like if I was doing predictions, I don't know if I'd say Pig gets any, but I think that one, I just really hope it does. And I know Joe watched it, I think today or last night. I know Tristan's seen it, but I don't think Bobby's seen it.
No, I have not. Yeah.
Yeah, I watched it last night, and I agree with you as far as Nicolas Cage's performance. To him, so far of what I've seen, the only two that I feel like are even contenders are Nicolas Cage in Pig, and then Will Smith in the movie we'll talk about later, King Richard. I haven't really seen anything else that makes me be like, oh, that should be an Oscar nominee. So hopefully it does get the love it deserves. The writing's really great in it. There's some great scenes, especially the scene when he runs into his former chef employee. Was really great.
I love that.
I saw some people hating on it and felt like it was in a different movie, but I loved it. I thought it was great. I basically agree with everything you say. It's not quite as high on my list as it is on your. I have it at 6. But it's still fairly high. I think part of it was I went into it with the mindset of expecting more of like that John Wick style movie, and then when it wasn't, it just like surprised me. So I think when I go back and rewatch it, it's going to be a lot higher on my list, and I'm going to enjoy it a lot more the second time now that I know more of what I'm in for.
Yeah.
But Tristan, you saw it as well, so I'll let you.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Pig. For a while, it was my favorite movie of the year. It was one that I just thought couldn't be beat, and especially from a first-time director, someone that I was not on my radar in any way as a director, to come out and have this big kind of smash with Nick Cage. And when you have Nick Cage in this kind of a role, it's easy to do that kind of, okay, it's Nick Cage. Give him like a chainsaw, have him go crazy and kill like 100 guys and be covered in blood and yelling. And I probably would have loved that movie too. But this movie had the guts to not do that and to subvert that, and to have Nick Cage, who you can do that and who you think can do that, and have him not do that in a very intentional way. I think it was a really strong casting of Nick Cage and using our expectations of him and his work against him in a way. Well, not against him, but sort of like against us and in favor of the movie. So I think it was a great use of Nicolas Cage. And I really think, I mentioned this John Wick, but with emotions instead of guns. It's like he's going around and kind of retracing his life, and similarly how John Wick had to like retrace his life for revenge, but in this case it's much more like a personal revenge. He's not necessarily going out and murdering all of these guys. It's a much lower stakes kind of action, but it's nonetheless thrilling. So if you haven't seen Pig, I know it's for rent on streaming right now. I don't think it's streaming anywhere for free. But yeah, you can rent it on Amazon and on YouTube and the usual spots to rent stuff. So as of now, it's not streaming yet, but it's number 5 on my list.
It's only like $7.99 to buy on Amazon Prime, and it's like $3.99 to rent it. So I'd recommend buying it because I think it's definitely worth rewatching. I can't wait to watch it again. I saw it once in theaters. I haven't seen it since, but it's tempting me. I'm gonna have to watch it again soon. But if you do want a Nicolas Cage movie that he goes crazy and has a chainsaw and has revenge, I recommend Mandy, another great Nicolas Cage performance. But it would have been really easy for Pig, like once they cast him to just kind of make a knockoff type of John Wick Mandy style script. And yeah, I agree. It was great casting, and it's probably the best performance of Nick Cage's career. And I know people kind of crap on him, and he does all these like strange movies, and he'll just do whatever script is thrown at him. But he's been doing a lot of interesting stuff in the last few years, and it kind of all culminated in this. So I really enjoyed it. And I think, Bob, you'll really like it. It also,
Yeah.
I think it also affected me just the way it did, because I work in restaurants and with food, and I enjoy cooking. And if you're into that, like, you'll be really into Pig. So that's my number one like recommendation if people haven't seen it. I know it, like in the film community and stuff, I think a lot of people know what it is, but outside of that, every time I tell someone, oh, Pig is, one of my favorite movies of the year, they have no idea what I'm talking about. But I had someone watch it at work. I told him about it a long time ago, and he came back the other day and was like, oh my God, I watched Pig, and I didn't know what I was going into, but it was amazing. I loved it. So I think it's a movie that everyone can enjoy, even though it's like got the typical like indie artsy type of background, or makes it look that way. I think it's just a movie everyone will enjoy.
I will say about your point of Nicolas Cage kind of having a resurgence and doing more interesting stuff. I think 2018 or 2019, Nicolas Cage was in the most movies rated with a positive rating on Rotten Tomatoes of his career. So he's kind of had his resurgence, where he was in that whole era from basically like 2010 through like 2016, 2017, where he was only just doing garbage. So he's kind of turned it around and is actually picking good projects now.
As for Oscar potential, I'm not quite sure if I see Nick Cage walking away with a win here. Is not because I don't think he's probably the best performance of the year, but I just don't necessarily feel the buzz around this, especially when it came out so early in the year. It's going to be hard to compete with, King Richard that just came out and is getting huge amounts of buzz, and something like Tragedy of Macbeth that has Denzel Washington that hasn't come out yet, but has getting, at least from like festival screenings, a lot of really good acting buzz. I think he has potential for this to be like the beginning of his big Cage-a-thon. Like I could see this leading to an Oscar win in a year or two, but as of now, this feels more like a putting him back on the mat performance than like a here's an Oscar performance from him.
Yeah, I agree with all that. So since we're talking about performances, is there anything that you guys have seen? I mean, outside of Pig and Nicolas Cage, what do you think? We'll get into more movies, but what do you think some of the leading candidates for Best Actor are this year from movies you've seen?
I think to me it's obviously we have like the Tragedy of Macbeth and some of those movies, but I think Will Smith as King Richard is the big front runner right now.
Yeah, I think so too, and I agree after watching it. I think going into it, I didn't have super high expectations. I thought this would be another like 7 Pounds or Concussion, where Will Smith's trying to win an Oscar, but the movie's not very good. It was really, really good, and I think that's going to help his chances, because he was good in Concussion, but the movie itself is dull. So he didn't get nominated for it. And this one, though, is going to get the buzz around it. It has, the staying power, I think. And it's hard to watch a movie with someone like Will Smith and have them disappear into a role. And at first you just see, that's Will Smith with a beard. But by the end of it, like, you are sucked into his character, and you see him as, Richard Williams. So I really loved his performance in that. The other one I'll throw out there, because I don't know if any of you have seen it. I don't think this is going to get nominated, because just like Pig, it's just not going to have the buzz. But Winston Duke in 9 Days should be nominated. He's on the same level as Nicolas Cage in Pig. He's incredible in it. And the whole movie is him carrying it basically throughout. You have a lot of side characters and stuff, but he's in pretty much every single scene, and he is amazing. Like, it's one of my favorite performances that I've seen. So I really hope that either Nicolas Cage or Winston Duke get some Oscar love, but I haven't heard any buzz around either of those for Oscar predictions or awards.
And for anyone,
I think there's a big shot for Andrew Garfield as Tick Tick Boom for the lead in that. I think he really like transformed into that iconic writer, and he's someone that we don't know a lot about in terms of like his mannerisms and the way he spoke. There's not a lot of video of him out there publicly, so to kind of take what is out there and to take what they were able to get from the family and kind of figure out to bring this kind of legendary person to life who's been talked about so much in the Broadway community. If you don't know, Tick Tick Boom is about John Larson, and at this point in his life, a struggling artist who then went on to create Rent, one of the hugely iconic, one of the biggest Broadway musicals of all time, and then tragically died the night before it opened. And it went on to be one of the biggest musicals of all time. It really kind of changed the way this music sounds in Broadway, and stuff like Hamilton owes a lot of debt to that musical that kind of introduced rock to Broadway and merged those sounds together in a more kind of youthful way. And I think this captures the struggle of that artist specifically, and like that moment in time of him struggling there. But I think it's also a very timeless tale that appeals to anyone at this point who's kind of like feeling like they're on the edge of giving up on what they want to do, or they feel like, I can barely pay my bills, I can barely make rent, and what is the struggle? What am I doing? And this is about that kind of struggle. And it's about kind of like picking it up and moving on. And he's working on a musical that ultimately is not a huge success in his career, but we do know from like our hindsight that he goes on after this to make Rent, and to see like he struggles here and could give up, but he doesn't. And then he goes on from there to make one of the biggest musicals of all time. And I think Andrew Garfield embodies that performance really well. He sings the whole time. He learned to sing for this performance, and it shows in the performance. So I think the movie and him were a big sleeper hit for me. One that I wasn't really on my radar as an Oscar potential movie, but after watching it, I think could be one that wins people over.
I agree. Having watched it, I think yesterday, and I'm not big on musicals typically, but I didn't love the music in it, and I don't think Tristan did either. The music's just fine in Tick Tick Boom, but Andrew Garfield's performance carries you through it and makes it enjoyable. So even if you're not really into musicals, you're not into the songs that are in it, I think there's still a lot to enjoy, because Andrew Garfield is just so entertaining throughout it. And that's another guy, he sucks you into his performance, and you don't really see him as Andrew Garfield, by the end of it for sure. Bobby, anything? I know you've seen maybe the blockbusters, but any performances in the movies you've seen kind of stick out to you?
As far as lead actor, I don't think anything that I saw is really going to be in contention. But as far as maybe some supporting performances, I think maybe Rebecca Ferguson in Dune could get some look. She's probably the standout, even though there's a lot of great performances in that movie. But not everyone has kind of a lot to do. She's like the main kind of side character in the movie, supporting character. The other one, it's the performance I think is better than the movie. It's not going to get a lot of look, but Emma Stone in Cruella was really good.
Yeah.
That's something that if they put it out in the awards, if they pushed it as an awards movie, maybe it would get a little bit more look, but I'm not really sure that will. The one I want to bring up though, as far as, because we were just talking about Tick Tick Boom, that I think may end up getting overshadowed. Like when it came out, and I know you're not a big fan of the style of music, Johnny, but In the Heights. When I saw it, that's a movie that, again, if they put it out around the same time, like Oscar season, they could push it, and that could maybe get some look, especially Best Director, because that's probably the strongest aspect of the movie to me is John M. Chu's directing. It's very stylish, maybe even the costume design. But for that one, as far as performances, I think it's more breakout stars that we're going to see more going forward. I think Anthony Ramos is a star in the making. We see the actress that plays Nina, Leslie Grace, was cast as Batgirl, so we're going to see her. And then Amanda, what's her name? The one that plays Vanessa Barrera. She's gonna. I think we're going to see all these kind of young actors coming up and maybe get breakout performances as far as Oscars go in the next 5-6 years.
All right. Yeah, I made it about 3 minutes in to In the Heights before I had to turn it off. So I was optimistic. I saw Tick Tick Boom, and I was like, okay, I can watch a musical.
Yeah.
This might get Oscar, love. So let me check it out. And I was almost immediately.
It's very much a Broadway show, but that's why I think the directing is really well done. If you're going to see any more of it, just kind of pay attention to how it's shot. Basically, especially a lot of the music scenes. If you just want to pick out a couple of, watch 96,000. If you just want to watch a YouTube video, the song 96,000, just numbers. That's probably the best shot scene. Other than a song later in the movie that's kind of interesting where they kind of walk up a wall. But yeah, it's really well done for what it is. But you definitely have to like that kind of movie or Broadway shows for sure.
I
I'm
think
not
there's
into like the Hamilton style hip hop, and it's like the same
Mhm.
thing of like just kind of poorly done for children rap music. I don't really like, so I can't really do it. But if it does get nominated, I will check it out. I will say I think Tick Tick Boom would have been better with a different director because Lin-Manuel Miranda is obviously behind In the Heights, but I don't think he's like a top tier director by any means. And I think Tick Tick Boom maybe would have stood out a little more if it was maybe like an actual movie director and not Lin-Manuel Miranda doing
I'm
it.
not sure that anyone else would have been able to capture Joe Larson quite as well as Manuel Miranda, who I think is kind of in a similar way revitalized the rock musical. And I think he you need someone who has experienced that life of being a struggling Broadway artist that I think captured that so well. And I think Tick Tick Boom, while being that, is also a larger tribute to like Broadway as a whole. It has a ton of great cameos, a lot of like well-known Broadway faces from across history in a lot of these sequences. And I really commended Lin-Manuel Miranda for his casting in that movie because he really every single person in the movie practically down even down to like the smallest roles or people who worked on Broadway. And in a year where Broadway was closed for so long, I was really touched by seeing Lin-Manuel Miranda come in and kind of give everyone that chance to perform together and bring it to life, especially tributing such a figure of history who is tragically never got to see how big he really became.
That's fair. I think for sure his involvement made it better, but I don't necessarily know. Like for a directorial debut, it was okay. There wasn't not anything in it that really like stood out to me of like, oh yeah, like I can't wait to see what Lin Manuel Miranda directs next. I know he's involved in soundtracks in a lot of movies. I love Moana, and he's behind all the music in that. But as far as like standout like first time directors, I think we had a lot of that this year. 9 Days was that. Pig was that. Um, even like movies that I don't know if the director did anything else, but Lamb, I'd be interested in whatever Vladimir Johansson does next. I think that was his first uh, movie that I'm aware of. Now it looks like he has one more, but it's just two people, and it's called Union of the North. It came out in 2017. But there are this year was a pretty good year for either first time directors or directors kind of putting themselves on the map. Joe, did you see anything that like you are excited to see what that director does next? Obviously, we've already talked about Pig.
It's hard. I'd go with a movie that you guys both recommended to me. Directors of that, and that's the directors of The Harder They Fall. They definitely have kind of their own style, unique take that I feel like the next thing that they come out with, you'd be able to watch it and be like, oh, that definitely feels like the same guys who directed The Harder They Fall. And if you don't know what that movie is, it's a western. It's on Netflix right now, and it's pretty much an all black cast, and they took a lot of black people who existed in that time period, in the Old West time period, and kind of had a fictionalized history of them all running into each other and interacting with each other. And it's a really good revenge movie. So if you watch Pig and you're like, man, I really was hoping for a revenge movie and didn't get it, throw on The Harder They Fall, and you'll get a fun kind of action revenge story.
Yeah, James Samuel is the director of that, and that was another one. First time director of like a full length film, and that one really stood out to me. I think that's going to end up as my like it's going to be in my top five. Right, when I first saw it, I was really high on it, and I thought I liked it more than Pig. And then when I kind of gave it time to breathe, I'm like, Pig is a definitely better movie. But if you're just looking for like the most fun movie of the year so far, I know a lot of people really like Suicide Squad, but The Harder They Fall is easily the most fun I've had watching a movie this year. Like you don't really need to think about much. You can enjoy all the performances, and um, you know it's just a lot of fun, and all the performances are great. I mean, the whole cast, every single what I think it did well was it gave every single character their moment and gave every actor a chance to show you what they got. Like some westerns, especially when you watch them, it's all about the lead actor and maybe the villain, and then you don't get a lot of those side characters to have like standout performances. But like every single person has their moment in this movie. I've loved RJ. I think it's RJ Seiler or
I think
I'm
it's
assuming.
Kyler.
I don't know if it's Kyler or Siler.
It's one of them.
It's one of the two. But I thought he was amazing in Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, and that his and he's like the most fun character in The Harder They Fall. I really like him. And Zazie Beetz, she's great in The Harder They Fall, and she is another one that I would point to and hope that she gets Oscar love for 9 Days, because I think she is definitely like she'll be in my personal top 5 supporting actress performances of the year. But I just don't know if that movie will get the push for it. But love Zazie Beetz.
Yeah. Another director I'd probably pick is a movie we haven't really talked about yet. I don't know if he's directed much. It doesn't look like it, and that is Michael Rionda, who directed The Mitchells versus the Machines. And so the next animated, I assume his next work will probably be animated. That will be, I'll definitely go check that out. And The Mitchells versus the Machines, it's an animated movie that's also on Netflix right now, I believe. And the plot is this family is going on the road trip to take their oldest daughter to college from Michigan to either California California.
California.
Michigan to California to take their oldest daughter to college, and there is a robot apocalypse, and it's kind of this whole family kind of coming together and surviving. And that sounds like it'd be a very dark, dreary movie, but it's a really fun, watch with the whole family adventure action animated comedy movie.
Yeah, that's in my top 5 for sure.
Yeah, it's my number 3 right now.
I like that one quite a bit. Not quite in my top 5 or anything like that, but I had a really good time with it, and I thought it painted the family really well and gave them all really strong personalities. I thought their lead character was really interesting. She was kind of like a bit older than a typical like animated character. She's not like a little kid, She's going to college. She's trying to figure out like what she wants to do. She's like a big film nerd too. So if you are a film nerd, I'm assuming you're probably a film nerd if you're watching this podcast, but yeah, she's obsessed with movies and she wants to be a filmmaker. And her parents don't understand how good her like dorky little films are. So it's kind of a fun like misunderstood artist kind of character. And I thought it was a really fun family adventure. So I had a good time with it. And like they said, this premise could have been dark, but it also could have been like really dumb and cheesy and just for kids. But this movie, I definitely feels like it is for the whole family, and that's something that you can all watch, and every character gets like a cool fun moment to do something cool and say something funny. So even the mom and dad who in some of these movies could be like one note dork characters who are just don't understand or never grow or anything like that, they change just as much as the main character does, and everyone in the family has their own arc. So I think it's a great family film to watch.
Yeah, when you watch the trailer for it and it's got the family getting attacked in a mall by a giant robot Furby, you don't expect to go into it and it to have as much heart as it does. And you always get that with some animated movies. Like that's what they go for. They try to pull on the heartstrings in some moments. But I thought The Mitchells vs. the Machines really balanced that super, super fun energy and the unique, like creative little filmmaker stuff with the actual like family dynamics is like the best part of the actual movie. So that's my favorite animated film since Spider-Verse. I know that wasn't that long ago, but those two stand out to me as like two of the best animated movies I've seen in a long, long time. And I'm glad to see and neither of them are Pixar movies. Like I feel like Pixar has been on the downturn, so you need some of these other animation studios or whatever else to come out with some interesting stuff. So I like to see that.
And also, if you're an NBA fan, Blake Griffin has a small role in the movie as well. So.
Speaking of NBA, no. Transition to Space Jam.
That's the movie here.
Yeah. I'm here to transition us to the movies that really matter.
All right. Yeah, let's
Bobby's here to talk about the important issues. I have not seen Space Jam, and I don't plan on it.
It's just sad kind of to watch. It's just not good to me.
Yeah.
It's a lot of advertisement for Warner Brothers properties, and the game at the end doesn't matter because they changed the rules to not be basketball rules, so you aren't invested in the game.
To me, the thing that doesn't make sense to me is how did the villains, right, not take the powers of classic like Warner Brothers characters? It's just like random powers from the game his son, LeBron's son, created. Like, why is it not like you're playing it? Why aren't the Looney Tunes playing against like Godzilla, Superman, Pennywise? Like,
It would make way more sense.
prominent Warner Brothers characters instead of like if that's how you want to cameos and advertise your other sectors of Warner Brothers, like that's how I would have done it, and that feels like it would have made the most sense.
Yeah, instead they're just like, I'm going to throw all the cameos in the background of this basketball game so that you can zoom in and see the Droogs.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Yeah.
So let me ask you about something for Space Jam. The first Space Jam movie is the same. You literally just described the first one, but it has an actual basketball game that's half of the movie. But we liked it because we saw it when we were kids and it hit us at the right time. Do you think at least, like, obviously we're not the audience for this Space Jam, but if you were a kid and you went to see this one, does it have the same impact on, like, the next generation as, like, the other Space Jam? Like
I think
the original
it does.
one did to us?
So my boss has a son that's like 5 or 6 years old, and he loves the new Space Jam. Like my boss talks about how his son watches that movie every single day. So and like since it got put out on Warner or HBO Max, he's watched it basically every single day. So I think it does have that same impact. I do think like you watch the original Space Jam, like it's not a great movie. Half the runtime of the movie is the basketball game. The plot makes no sense. Like I think that movie survives purely on nostalgia and it works.
And Bill Murray.
But like it's not a well-made movie. There's a reason the director of it never went on to direct another movie again. And
well, the only reason he was the director of that movie is because he shot the whole movie was written because there was a commercial for shoes with Marvin the Martian trying to steal Nikes or whatever, and then Michael Jordan and Bugs Bunny get it back. So they just basically gave a movie to that guy because of a commercial.
But if that movie
is an advertisement.
But if that movie was good and well made, other people would have been like, "Hey, we want you to direct our movie," and they just never did.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I was tortured watching Space Jam 2, to be honest. Me and Joe did a live watch of it.
If you want my live reactions to the movie, Tristan and I did a live drink-along to Space Jam: A New Legacy the night it came out.
Yeah, that was like one of those experiences where you're like, do I even want to watch movies anymore? Like, is it worth it? You know, like is it worth
what
this?
am I doing to myself?
Yeah.
I know. It's an embodiment of everything I fear for the future of cinema. You know, it's just pure IP, just throwing recognizable things at you with no context and not even using them in interesting ways. Like Joe and Bobby said, like if they would have, the team's made up of half Warner Brothers characters, half like Looney Tunes, and they have to learn to work together. Maybe like LeBron is scattered throughout the Warner Brothers multiverse and he has to go look and find his son again, kind of a thing. They could have done so much to make that actually work into the plot somehow, but all they did was have a montage of a bunch of characters, you know, in like a couple minute sequence, and then at the end had a bunch of Party City CGI characters run around in these god awful interpretations of the characters, providing the nightmares I've had ever since. Like the looks on some of those background characters' faces, they want you to zoom in and look at them, but if you zoom in and look at them, it's like horrifying. You're like, what is this? Who hired this person? Who told them to make that face? Was this just like a stock video they put in here? Like, where do they find this? But yeah, very low effort. I hope I never have to talk about it again after this year's over. If I had my kid and they were watching it every single day, I'd be like, you know what? Is it too early? Is it too late for adoption? You know, like you don't need them anymore.
Yeah. So it might have that impact on some kids. It's just, it doesn't, I don't know. It just doesn't, even watching the old Space Jam, I think that is even a better movie, even though that's not a good movie than this one. It at least has somewhat of a through line that makes sense. The game's better. The villains are better and more recognizable. At least something. There's something to it.
You get the Michael Jordan stretching his arm out moment.
Yeah.
Like you get a few scenes that stand out, and I don't think I've seen anything from this one.
Like
what?
Like I don't care if you spoil it. He doesn't really, but he does and doesn't at the same time. It's weird. He all of a sudden appears at the end in the real world because he's there. Like, you know.
So
they kill Bugs Bunny,
and then he's just back again.
Kind of.
I tweeted this out after watching the movie. It's NBA players fused with like these powers that his son creates in the video game, like a cell phone video game that his son makes, and like that's where they play the basketball is inside the video game his son makes, and because it has all these like weird rules and like there's style points and all this shit. they should have fused NBA players with Warner Brothers characters, like I said, and these are the fusions I would have done. You could have had for your point guard, Damian Godzillard, which would have been amazing. Your shooting guard, Clayface Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
For your
Justice League's in there.
for your shooting forward, maybe include a woman on here, so you have Harley Quindis Parker, and then your power forward, Anthony Wise Davis, and for your center, Morton Joel Embiid.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, it's way better.
So, to get off Space Jam, because we can't talk.
Please.
Talk about Space Jam as long as we talk about
Let's
pigs.
talk about Halloween Kills.
No, well, that's actually where I want to go.
Yeah.
Not necessarily Halloween Kills, but everyone just, what's a movie that you were, I know we kind of expected Space Jam to be bad and not really for us, but what's a movie that you went into excited for and were really disappointed by, or just either because it was bad or didn't meet your expectations? So, Bobby, since you've seen a lot of the big blockbusters that probably had a lot more hype around them, what was one for you that was just like a total disappointment or not what you expected it to be?
I think really the only one that fell into that category for me was Halloween Kills, like I said, where it was like there maybe were a couple were just maybe they were just okay, but maybe I didn't have as big of expectations. But I really, really liked the 2018 Halloween movie. So I had pretty high expectations for this one. And it just seemed like it seemed like a movie that they had the first movie that they wanted to make. They had a third movie they wanted to make. And this one, they just wanted to have Michael Myers kill people. But then all the characters are just so dumb that it's really hard to watch. And it's just a lot of cheesy, corny type of things that were, even if they were included in Evil Dies Tonight repeated over and over in the stupid mob thing and all that. But it's basically, I'm still kind of curious about the third one, but it definitely lowered my expectations for it. Because I didn't even think it was as well shot. It was a lot more money into this one than the first one, and I think that you don't really see it on screen. The kills are brutal, but for kind of no reason. Michael Myers doesn't seem to have like a any type of real reason to do what he's doing in this one type of stuff. And that was just the only one that was disappointing to me. It's a lot of it more falls into the realm of all the other Halloween sequels where it might have some entertaining moments, but it's not overall a very good movie. Instead of the 2018 one, which I thought was a really well done, if you're going to kind of retool it or reboot, whatever you want to call it, where you just acknowledge the first movie, then move forward. But that's kind of the only one for me that fell in that camp as being a disappointing movie after all hype around it.
Yeah, I was super bummed to see the reactions and the reviews and the Rotten Tomatoes score and stuff for Halloween Kills, because I thought, I'm a huge fan of the Halloween franchise, and there's only pretty much one like actual good movie, and that's the original, up until the 2018 one. I thought was awesome. It's from the creators of Eastbound and Down, so you actually got some like comedic moments in there, and you got what I think they did effectively. They had a couple of scenes where you don't see Michael Myers kill people, you just see the aftermath of it, and it was effective. It didn't feel like, oh, they didn't just have the budget to do this, so they shot afterwards. It felt like they actually put it on there for a reason, and it worked. And then everyone for this movie basically shit on it, and I was like, oh, that's a bummer that this was just like a cash grab, basically, because they could have just left it off with the last one, but I know it made a bunch of money, so they wanted to make a new one. Joe, what about you? Anything that you were looking forward to that disappointed you?
Yeah, for me, I feel there's one movie that I feel like everyone else saw a completely different movie than me, and that's The Suicide Squad. Everyone was hyping it up, saying like, oh, this one's so amazing. And then I remember watching it, and I'm like, outside of just not being a music video every other scene, which is definitely an improvement over the original, I was kind of finished watching it, and I'm like, I don't know if I even enjoy that much better than the first one. Like, it just, whatever I saw just didn't come together for me the same way it seemed to come together for everyone else. Part of me feels like the tone of it and everything just felt off. Like, I just don't think James Gunn and going the Guardians of the Galaxy style and tone is the right direction for Suicide Squad. I still think the original like David Ayer style. Whether the first movie came together or not, I don't think what his direction was going for is why that movie failed. I think it was more of the blending of the two styles is why that first one was so bad. But I almost think the more serious, style of when characters die, it actually feels like powerful and emotional, not rather than just like a joke half the time. Would be the better route to go for that franchise, and I think that was my problem. Is it was just like felt like a comedy when it shouldn't have been.
I think what it did well and what I enjoyed about the Suicide Squad was the way it opens and starts and has you follow these characters, then completely subverts that. That was like the best possible way you could show what the Suicide Squad does. And I think a lot of the characters were fun, but I think the worst part of it is the third act because I know that like the star is on the people's face and it explains that they die afterwards, but it was so jarring to me of these people that you're supposed to be rooting for just murdering civilians that have the star in their faces. That was like extremely jarring to watch for me. Just like in a superhero movie, you have to have the scene of like faceless nobodies attacking people, but like for them to go basically into a third world country and then just be like, I'm supposed to be rooting for Idris Elba shooting these like civilians in the face. Like I didn't like that part of it, so I thought that was kind of weak. But it was just so much better than the first one. I think that was a lot of the hype, but I thought it was pretty. I thought it was about as well done as I'd expect a Suicide Squad movie to be. I don't know what else I really expect from a property that, for some reason, was something that they really wanted to rush and make, like as one of the first movies that DC really wanted to get out there for their extended universe. Even though it's not that super well known in the comics, it's kind of an obscure thing.
I felt Harley Quinn was super tacked on as well. Like it almost felt like James Gunn had the script entirely written, and Warner Brothers was like, "Oh, Harley Quinn's not in your script at all. You need, she was super popular, and one of the things people liked about the last one, got included because she had an entire like plot completely separate from everyone else, and then joined in kind of more towards the end." And then at the end, she really didn't do much except take javelin, and pierce Starro with it.
Except for kill the star. I do think I kind of agree with the Harley Quinn thing, but one of my favorite scenes in the movie was when she just kills the guy.
Yeah, like that was a good scene.
Like, immediately, that scene made it all worth her being in it. For me.
Yeah, that scene in her breakout scene. I think you're definitely the lowest
on that for all of us.
Yeah, I might be because it sounds like I'm higher than you, Johnny, on it. I don't know comparatively to Tristan, but I really loved the Suicide Squad. The tone worked for me. It's one of those I can see if the tone doesn't work, it's not going to be your movie.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't hit you in the right way, then you're kind of just going to be out and not really care. But most of the jokes hit for me. There are a couple that maybe fell flat, but when they take that many swings at it and it's a and it's a good batting average, then that makes an enjoyable movie for that type of one. And then I just thought the character work was very well done for characters that you had never heard of before, like Ratcatcher 2, making you care about that character. And with the backstory and kind of the nice little cameo of Taika Waititi you see in her story as her dad. That was well done.
Yeah, I think the tone definitely is what either you bought into it and you were really into like the ride of everything being really dark or really ridiculous. Like it had a very, very dark sense of humor, but then it also in things with like the Peter Capaldi scene where he kind of reveals the villain plan and like the gore of it really makes it feel actually pretty dark. And I think that could be a lot to stomach for people, especially in like the DC realm of comic book movies that you think are going to be one way. And yeah, if you're not ready for that kind of an experience, it can turn you off for the whole entire movie. But I had a good time with it. I thought it really rode that line for me of never going too far. And I think like the sequence, for example, of them going through and killing all these guys in this kind of camp in this really badass way and showing it all off and making it seem like they're all like showing off how cool they are at killing. And then you get to the end of the sequence and they reveal who these guys actually are. And it's like, it could be a gut punch or it could be you laugh out loud in your seat. And I think that moment is like when you realize if you're either in for the movie or not. And in my crowd, I could tell like some people were laughing so hard that we were like holding our guts and the other people were like about to walk out the theater. And I feel like that's one of those kind of like watershed moments in the movie where it's like, okay, you're in or you're out, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Tristan, what was a movie that you were looking forward to that either didn't meet your expectations or you just didn't like at all?
One that I was really looking forward to out of curiosity and enjoyment of the source material was Dear Evan Hansen. You know, I didn't expect it to be incredible or anything like that, but I was like, this is going to be like a solid movie musical. You know, I like the original play. I like the music in it. I think Ben Platt gives a great performance on stage, and it's kind of like the whole life behind that character and why it resonated so well with people. And I thought in the times of 2020, 2021 era, like the concept of social media's role in mental health could be something that was really relevant and really started a conversation. And I think the isolation has only led to more of people living their lives digitally and not living in reality, and kind of have these long lies that get exaggerated into big exaggerated things on the internet. But then the movie comes out, and none of that really plays in. It's all just a big ego trip for Ben Platt to show off how good he is at acting, and it backfires because he's looks so weird and uncomfortable among all these people who look like high school students. And you know, and like Ben Platt has played people younger than this character before, and he's pulled it off fine. But this movie like actively makes him look worse than he already looks age wise, and it's like he looks older than he does in normal life somehow in this movie, and it's very distracting. And they cut a lot of the songs that I think humanize the character of Evan Hansen. So what you essentially get is like this sociopathic character who takes advantage of a classmate who kills himself and says, "Oh yeah, I knew him. He was my best friend," and then starts taking money from this family to show off how to exaggerate this big lie of, "Oh, I knew this guy." And of course, all of the nuance is kind of lost in translation here between the stage and the movie, and it ended up being a huge mess with okay music, but you can't give them credit for okay music that they didn't write. You know, like they took it from another thing and didn't completely screw it up. So I guess you're better than Cats in that regard, but like you couldn't even have translated the story in any way. And yeah, very big disappointment that I think like single-handedly is going to kill this musical's longevity in the conversation, is probably going to really hurt Ben Platt's career going forward. Yeah, not a good look.
Yeah, that one looks real bad. And that's not for me, obviously. So I get seeing that and, you know, just being like, okay, this might not be for everyone and people are making fun of the casting, but maybe I'll have fun with it. And then it just falling completely flat. The one for me that did that I was looking forward to, I thought it, you know, you attach Taylor Sheridan to a movie, I'm up for it. Like I know behind the scenes, like he wasn't as involved as maybe you'd think, but for those who wish me dead, the Angelina Jolie movie that came out earlier this year just was so disappointing, because at least going into it, I figured at the worst, it's going to be a fun movie with some good performances and maybe some like tension in it. And it just, the whole movie, I'm just watching it and it's just like getting worse and worse. And Angelina Jolie's character should die at least like 6 times and is fine. Like she literally falls like off like 100-foot ladder, barely grabbing a rope, falls on her back on the ground and just has some rope burn on her hand. And I was like, you would be dead so many times. And it just kept doing that the whole movie. And it just, you know, for me to really believe a movie that is supposed to be this woman is protecting this kid and someone's coming after them, you have to have stakes. And it just didn't do a good job of setting that up. And it was really just something that I expected going in, like at worst, it'll be like a three or 4 out of 5, like whatever. And it was just not for me, and it just wasn't very well made. So that one, I think for me, was the one going into it, because if I'm looking at my list of just like every other movie that I have ranked lower than it, like the Conjuring movie that came out this year, or Don't Breathe 2, or even like Zack Snyder's Justice League, I knew going into it that I wasn't going to be about those, but that one was the one film I feel like I saw this year that going into it I was excited for, and it just fell completely flat. I don't know if anyone else saw it, but
no.
I didn't see that.
Don't waste your time.
Yeah, I saw that. I had it ranked very low at number 48 on my list out of 55. So even lower than Dear Evan Hansen.
Wow.
Lower than Halloween Kills by a single slot.
And that's disappointing, because I really do like Taylor Sheridan, and I did want to see anything that he's involved with, but maybe I'll skip this one and go to his next project.
Don't worry about this one.
But speaking of Angelina Jolie, a movie that I thought might be one of those that, you know, had high expectations for me and then didn't meet them based on the critic reviews was Eternals. And I actually liked that quite a bit. I thought it was really good.
I think I'm the only
for
one here who
Marvel.
didn't see
Yeah.
it, but I'm pretty sure all three of you like that movie. And honestly,
it exists.
yeah, it exists. So Joe's the lowest on it. So I'm interested just to
Yeah.
hear for those. I think Tristan liked it a decent amount. Bobby's high on it. Joe's iffy, like whatever about it.
Yeah, like if I never watch it again, I'll be fine. But it's not like horrible. It's not bad. But there was just like nothing there. It was just like a lot of. I can't remember where. Maybe it was off air that I was talking with Tristan about it. I remember saying that I feel like it couldn't figure out if it was an ensemble cast movie or if it was solely focused on. Blanking on the lead actress's name. But solely and I think it should have chosen
Gemma Chan.
Yeah, Gemma Chan. I feel like it should have focused on
Love
one or
her.
the other and been completely, basically, from her perspective, telling the story, or been more of like an ensemble movie where there wasn't a direct lead, but it felt like it was kind of bouncing back and forth. And there were moments that I feel like the movie would have been better just from her perspective, and moments that and there were like Jolie's whole plot line felt pointless ultimately in the end of her having memory problems and all that. Didn't really feel like it resolved at the end, but ultimately didn't feel like it went anywhere important that they needed it in the movie. And there was just a lot of moments like that I feel like if maybe we saw more of her character, it would have felt more impactful or more important. But I think that's a lot of my main problem with the movie, is it needed to either be fully a Gemma Chan led movie or be a fully ensemble movie, but it landed somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, and those worked better for me, especially the Angelina Jolie storyline. I think worked very well because Johnny hasn't seen it. I don't want to go like too much into it, but the reason behind why that's happening to her was enough of a cool story and kind of reveal to me to have that be worth being in the movie. And the characters, yeah, I can see where you would want, because Gemma Chan kind of had the least, even though she's the main character, she kind of had the least to do.
Yeah.
But I liked her character, and I liked kind of, sometimes there are movies where your lead is just kind of walking you through the situation, and you're kind of looking at it through their eyes for the most part, and that worked better for me than you. Like this isn't like one of my top Marvel movies, but the direction I thought was great. Chloe Zhao I think did a really good job, and it didn't have the same feel as a lot of Marvel movies, which I really enjoyed, and it's a very, very grand and epic scope to it, that it makes a lot of the Marvel movies feel very small, even like Infinity War, and that like the scale of what they're telling this story is really interesting to me. So I think that sucked me in a lot more than it would if it was maybe the same plot, but they don't kind of explain what's going on, or that you just following the characters. And because the characters in the movie, Johnny, they don't know kind of what's happening for a good portion of it. If they don't have the big reveal of what's kind of going on in the grand plot, maybe the movie falls flat for me, but that really pulled me in. And the way
I found myself really moved by this movie, actually. I thought it was it wasn't incredible in the plot wise. I think some of that kind of felt like lost, and I do feel like it was this merging of Chloe Zhao and Marvel, and some of that merging didn't quite come together in certain regards, and I thought maybe some of the humor didn't work quite well. But overall, I thought this was a really great movie. And Bobby mentioned the scale and the scope, and that big reveal especially. I think it's one of those reveals that I actually felt like the reveal, and I actually felt like the oh god moment of like, wow, what are we gonna, like, how this is so much bigger than I ever thought it was going to be. And like, not just like in any sense of like, oh, it's not like here comes a character I didn't think was going to be it or anything that, no, I didn't know any of these characters going in, but just the like the scale of the visuals and the scope of the action, I felt so engaged by it. And I thought the movie danced around some interesting themes about like, do we save humanity, do we not, and like, what's humanity to the cost of like these other civilizations and things like that. And I don't want to go into super detail on a lot of that, what the choices end up being, but like, that's kind of the pondering they do of like, what is the value of life, and then what is our role as these superpowered beings who essentially can die and have infinite power? Like, do we intervene with history, or do we not intervene with history? And I love those interesting questions I never thought I'd ask coming out of a Marvel movie. So for me, it's among the better Marvel movies, but I wouldn't put it like in the top tier. But it's definitely like one that I'm going to go back to and watch again and appreciate more and more.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. And I think this movie actually did something better than a movie that tried to do, I think, a similar kind of concept in the beginning, at least, is Prometheus. And I enjoyed Prometheus, but they have a similar with the engineers, and that is kind of a similar concept that this one goes for. And I think this meets that, plot line and the scale of that and the scope of it a lot better than that movie. So if you want to compare it to another one, I think those had a same kind of concept behind it, and this one hit better for me, and I liked Prometheus.
Okay. So in like a month when Eternals is on Disney Plus or however long, and it's sitting there next to Black Widow, what do you recommend I, having not wasted my time with either so far?
Eternals.
What do you think I should watch?
I preferred Black Widow, but I would say you watch Eternals first, because if you've seen the trailer for Black Widow, like, Black Widow is not, it doesn't really deviate of what you would expect from a Marvel movie. Like, if you've seen the trailer, you kind of know exactly what you're going to get from that movie, where Eternals is different. But to me, it just didn't come together. You might enjoy it more like Bobby and Tristan did, but I would still say to watch, if you had a choice to watch one, I would say to watch Eternals, just because it is more different than Black Widow is from a lot of the other of the MCU stuff.
Yeah, for me, the ceiling of what you're gonna like of Black Widow is very low, but the ceiling of Eternals is very high. You could hate Eternals, but you also could love Eternals, and I think Black Widow, the best you're gonna say is like that was good,
Yeah.
I think Eternals will elicit strong reactions one way or another, and that's usually more engaging.
Yeah, I think Black Widow is. I enjoy the movie, but it's like a mid-tier Phase 2 movie of Marvel, I would say, and it falls into the same traps of the early Marvel movies where the villain's not very good, and like the plot's kind of, it's okay, but the main characters and crew that you're following, the family that they kind of develop, is really good, and that's kind of what you're enjoying out of it is Black Widow and the family that she has in the movie. That's well done.
Yeah, Black Widow is definitely one of those movies that they spent $200 million on that would have been 10 times better if they spent $80 million on.
Yes, 100%. 100%. That the third act, like you said, Angelina Jolie should have died a million times. Black Widow is still a human, and she should have died a million times in the end of that movie too. So falling from a guy onto pieces of metal and stuff.
It's like in Fast and Furious when they use cars as like they're breaking their falls, and it's like, no, that would just do more damage to you than if you just laid it on the ground.
Yeah.
So transitioning from that, I'll check out Eternals before I bother with.
The only thing I would say, Johnny, because I think
Black
Widow is on Disney Plus. If you're planning on watching Hawkeye at all, I would watch Black Widow.
I have seen the end credit scene for Black Widow. That's the only thing I've seen.
It's not that. that it's there's a just because you've seen the post credit scene, just to know that character more, probably is the reason.
And that character is like the only reason to watch the movie, essentially.
He's really good.
Like that character, and I think the Red Bear, whatever that character's name is, the David Harbour's character.
David Harbour, he's really good.
He's really good in that too.
Yep.
All right, so transitioning away from that, there's a couple movies on here I want to specifically bring up. Maybe they'll come up with this, but what was a movie that maybe you went into, so opposite of that, maybe you didn't have as high of expectations for, and it kind of went, above and beyond that, and you really enjoyed it, or a movie that you went into with high expectations and it met those expectations?
Here,
I have one of each of those, but
wait, what? Can you say that again? I was thinking of what are our two?
So either a movie that you didn't really think much of, you went in and you enjoyed it a lot, or a movie that you had very high expectations for and it met them, rather than fall flat for you.
All right, I didn't really have any movies so far this year that I had super high expectations for and met them. So far, really, the only movie that I think that will be is Nightmare Alley, Guillermo del Toro's movie that's coming out around Christmas time. But other than that, there's no big director movie that I am a super, like Denis Villeneuve directed Dune, which is basically the quality I expected it to be. But other than that, like there was no like Tarantino or Christopher Nolan or big director that I cared about that had a movie come out, or a property that I super care about that had a movie come out. So I didn't. There hasn't been a movie I had a lot of expectations for, but a movie that I currently have at my number 4 slot that I went into it this weekend fully expecting it to be like mid-range, and maybe that's why it's so high. Maybe on a rewatch it'll drop a little bit. Is Ghostbusters Afterlife, which I think so far I'm the only person here that's seen it. I will
Yeah.
say it does tread a little bit too much into the whole member berries aspect that other movies like The Force Awakens have been kind of dragged down by. But I think there are other moments where they kind of use that and it pays off, and I think it was very smart. It's not like a retread of the original. It's not like, oh, it's a sequel and it's like these four men in New York City find like the Ghostbusters equipment and start their Ghostbusters, start a new Ghostbusters company in New York City, and it's basically like a remake of the original. It's very much a new story, very much its own thing. I think it tells the story well. And yeah, I don't want to say too much of it because it just came out this last weekend. I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah, that would be the movie for me that I had really no expectations for, and I left it being genuinely surprised by how much I liked it.
Okay.
Oh, and I'll
I
say
like
McKenna
that.
Grace
I'm
is
excited for Ghostbusters.
the next big I think child actor to break into being a good adult
McKenna
actor.
Grace.
Yeah, she's young now. She's I think like 12, 13 years old, but I will not be surprised to see her basically continue and act, all through her adulthood if that's what she chooses to do. I could see her being like a Natalie Portman in that way.
Yeah, I just watched I, Tanya for the first time the other day, and she's not in it for long, but she plays Tanya Harding when she's younger, and she's really good in that. So, yeah, McKenna Grace. Outside of that, like I haven't seen Gifted, and I haven't obviously yet to see Ghostbusters, but I think she's right up there as like one of those stars to watch out for. Because the other one is I think it's Julia Butters from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is like the other actress that like anything she does, and like if she sticks with film and is an actress her whole career, that is one that I think could be awesome. Like just to follow what she ends up doing, because she was even like she's in the best scene of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and then she is in one skit of I Think You Should Leave, which is my favorite show, and she's so funny in it. So I really like to follow her career as well, and excited to see like McKenna Grace. I like seeing those like next big stars kind of come up.
And McKenna Grace is good in The Haunting of Hill House, which is a miniseries on Netflix as well.
Yeah, I have yet to see those, but I'm excited to watch them, and I will one day. But I've been on like a movie kick, so I haven't really started a show because then I'll be watching that. But yeah, so Ghostbusters, I'm excited for. Mm-hmm. I think after just hearing Joe's review of it is probably similar to like my feelings. I don't think I'm going to watch it and just be disappointed by it. I think I'm just going to go in and have fun with the world of Ghostbusters again, which is all I want from this movie. Bobby, anything you went into not either caring much about and it excited you, or it was better than you expected it, or anything like that?
I have one of both of those. I think one that might fall into that camp, in one of those camps for you, is No Time to Die, where I had high expectations, especially for James Bond as a franchise and being Daniel Craig's last movie, and I think that met or exceeded my expectations on that level. I have a couple minor problems with it, and I have to see it a few times, but it's a really good movie, and it's a good closeout to the Daniel Craig saga as Bond. So that's definitely one that met my expectations or exceeded it when I already had high expectations. One that I had like zero expectations for and just watched it because I thought it would be a watchable movie with good leads is Jungle Cruise. And I just watched that a few days ago or a week ago or so, and it's nothing special, but it's better than I thought it would be. Like it has a few twists in the plot that are actually pretty interesting, especially with Dwayne Johnson's character, and Emily Blunt and The Rock are really good in it. I don't think you can watch it and just and dislike it. But I thought it would just be an okay watchable movie, and it was better than that for me. I thought it was pretty good, and I'd see another one, like solid. So that's one I had like no expectations for, and it at least was like I enjoyed it.
All
So,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, good choices. I totally agree, and I think all of us here agree on the No Time to Die thing because, yeah, going into it, I didn't know what I expected. I just wanted it to be a good closeout for Daniel Craig, and I thought it was like the perfect movie for that, and I was on board for almost everything it did. I loved the inclusion of We Have All the Time in the
All the
World.
time in the world.
Yeah, that like when the credits hit and that song starts playing, like I almost shed a tear. I was like,
Yeah.
I shouldn't be crying at a James Bond movie, but I am right now. Tristan, anything for you that exceeded your expectations or met your high expectations?
Yeah, there's a lot that I would had high expectations for coming into the year, but one that was on my list as something that I was going to check out, but not something my highest priority was James Wan's latest movie, *Malignant*. Uh, we James Wan is a director I know, and I liked Aquaman enough, but I've never been quite a big James Wan fan. You know, especially I thought his direction in the Insidious or in the Conjuring movies recently has been kind of very boring and flat. Versus, you know, he did do some good work in *Fricke 7*, I guess, and some good work in Insidious. But I thought in recent years, especially in the horror, he lost any sense of style, and it was just kind of like these very flat, dreary movies. And then *Malignant* came out, and right from before the logos even start, you're already introduced to what this movie is going to be. And from the opening sequence, it's just complete fun. And he treads through all these different genres of horror and covers like this. So the premise is essentially that this woman is. I don't even know what the premise how to describe the premise of this movie, to be honest with you, because it twists you right in the middle. But yeah, this is a wild horror ride that James Wan takes you on in *Malignant*, and it follows this woman who is kind of in the shock of this grisly kind of abuse situation. She kind of realizes she can see these visions of murders as they're happening and tries to uncover why they're happening. And you're going along the journey with her, trying to figure out why. And from some of the scenes, it starts out in that gray James Wan kind of tone, but it immediately kind of builds and builds and builds and builds until you realize, oh, this is going completely off the rails. And I love the twists in this. I love the style in this. It goes all over the place. From all these different genres of horror, like I said, from a haunted house movie to a giallo movie later on to horror action later on. And if you want to see James Wan kind of take a big budget and run away with it and do whatever he wants and really unleash in a way I never thought he was even capable of doing, I thought *Malignant* was a great one. It's in my top 3 of the year right now. If it'll stay there, I don't know, but for right now, it's up there.
Yeah, if you want a further discussion on *Malignant*, I recommend checking out our episode from last week. We did or no,
it was
from
like
a couple
2 or
weeks
3
ago.
weeks.
It was
The
on our
horror
horror
bracket.
bracket, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So from about 3 weeks ago, check out our horror bracket. We have kind of an in-depth discussion. Tristan and Joe are really high on it. I don't think Bobby's seen it yet, and
Yeah, I have.
I was. I forgot if you had or not.
I liked it quite a bit, but it like not as much as Tristan, but I thought it was really, really fun. And there's stupid stuff in it, but it was really fun.
I think that's a movie that will kind of be a love-hate if you watch it. But I will say, as far as like a dumb horror movie with like, I went in with no expectations and really liked it. It was called, what the fuck is it even called? It's the Killer Jeans movie. It is called Slacks. Slacks. So yeah, I recommend it. It's fun. It's a movie that was made with no budget, and it did everything in its power to kind of, stray away from that. A movie about killer genes, you go in, you expect it to just be like rubber or one of those dumb like inanimate objects killing people movies, but there's actually some depth to it, and it actually has something to say. So I actually recommend that. But as far as my own question, couple small movies I want to give a shout out to. One I went in with no expectations because I had never heard of it, was Old Henry. It stars Tim Blake Nelson. It's a Western. It's kind of your, we've seen it in Unforgiven. We've seen it in some Westerns before of this guy he's a farmer. He's got a son. He obviously has secrets and a dark past. He might have been an outlaw. You don't know much about him. And then, they find a guy who has been shot and he ends up in their house, and then people are coming after him, and you kind of get to see the wrath of Tim Blake Nelson. First of all, I love a good movie where a character actor gets to lead, and Tim Blake Nelson's awesome in it. Um, Obviously, like, he's a supporting character in pretty much everything he's ever done, whether it's Oh Brother Where Art Thou or The Incredible Hulk or other things.
Holes.
But and Holes, and he's great, and he's always standout. So I really enjoyed that. It's a good Western. When the reveal happens of like what this guy used to be, it worked for me on so many levels, and it was super fun. It wasn't just, oh, he used to be an outlaw. There's more to it, and it was it really had a lot of enjoyment for me. It's nothing special. It's not going to blow you away. It's not going to be your number one movie of the year. But if you like a Western, if you like a movie like that, like, I definitely recommend checking that out. It went in areas that I didn't think it would. And I went into it having just seen it that it was on Amazon, and I was in a Western kick because of The Harder They Fall. So I watched it and I really enjoyed it. The other one that is a smaller film that I had a lot of expectations for, and it met them, was The Beta Test, the newest movie from Jim Cummings and PJ McCabe. Jim Cummings had done, I most recently saw him, like, I kind of discovered him from watching The Wolf of Snow Hollow, which I recommend to anyone, and Thunder Road, which was his first movie. He is just the most, like, I don't know, when he's on screen, your eyes are glued to it. I think the movie itself, I don't know, maybe they could have done a little more with the story, but I think his performance, like, he should be nominated for an Oscar for sure, but he won't. It'll go completely, it's not going to be a big enough movie. It's not going to have a big enough push to do it, but it's like the best anxiety filled movie I've seen since Uncut Gems. And I really recommend that, especially if you like a movie like that. If you've seen Good Time, if you've seen Uncut Gems, where the lead of the movie is not a likable character, but he's super enjoyable to watch. And even though he's not very likable, you're kind of rooting for him. It's a very similar style story. And it has some stuff to say in there too about toxic masculinity and about people living today and trying to make names for themselves and stuff. So it goes into that. But the other one too that I think going into it, I wasn't expecting very much, and this will kind of transition us because I think at least I don't know if anyone else watched. I went into King Richard not expecting very much, and I thought it was really, really good. It was a great story, and it's the best performance of Will Smith's career since that one episode of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and you all
How
know
come
what
he don't want me, man?
about. Yeah, exactly. So it was exciting to see Will Smith really break out and not only do his like Oscar-y movie, but the movie itself to actually come together and be really good. So I highly recommend that. Has anyone else watched King Richard yet?
Yeah, I watched it this weekend, and I will say, if you've been listening, we haven't really broke down what King Richard is. It's basically the story of Venus and Serena's dad and like him pushing them to be basically what they become, and I think it kind of it asks the question basically like is that the right way to do things? Is pushing your kids to that degree to make sure, and basically he's kind of in the movie says like, because I don't want them to be out on the streets, and so like that's why I push them so hard, and it's kind of asked the question like, is that the right thing? Is to basically, is it worth it to like push your kids to that degree to like make sure they have the right life? And I will say the movie in a lot of aspects reminded me of Ford versus Ferrari, in the sense of it's like a very simple story, very like simple script, but the performances and the directing and everything is just so well done that it still becomes a really good movie, where I feel like it very possibly could just be like a kind of a bad TV movie, but I think because of the performances and everything, it's what elevates it to the next level. And I really enjoyed it. It's very simple, like I said, but everything about it's so good that I think it stands out. I think it's going to be hopefully remembered as one of the better sports movie. I know you're doing a top 30. It's like this is also in a sense like Moneyball, that it's hard to qualify really as a sports movie just because the sport takes a backseat to the story. The sport itself really doesn't come into play until the final minutes of the movie. But
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one every single character they have in the movie has their moment and is really good. The girls who played Serena and Venus are awesome. John Bernthal is always great. I had forgotten that he was even in the movie until he shows up, and he's entertaining every time he's on screen. But yeah, it's Will Smith's best performance. I think you might get. I think you're definitely going to get Will Smith to be nominated for this, but I wouldn't be surprised if I have to look at her name, and I believe it's pronounced Anjanou Ellis, who plays Oracene, his wife. I think she could get a Best Supporting Actress nod because she's really, really good in it and has a couple really memorable scenes. Like Joe said, it's a pretty simple sports story. I was a little worried going in because if you know the actual story of Richard Williams, he's had ups and downs in his life. He's made some questionable decisions. He's not exactly the most likable guy that you're always going to root for in real life. I think this movie did a good job of, you want the lead character of this specific film to be likable and you want to root for what he's doing. And I think they do that well, but they also kind of dive into the, is he making the right decision? Like Joe mentioned, I think they do that really well. And I wasn't sure if they were or not, because I didn't want them to kind of deify him, because I know that the daughters were producers on the film, and you never know when the actual people are involved in the story if you're going to get the real thing. The timeline of it doesn't get into his divorces or affairs or anything like that. You don't really need any of that in this story. So they do a good job of just telling the story the story that they want to tell, and do a good job of having ups and downs of, is he, I really like this guy, and then of, is he making the right decision here? Do I agree with what he's doing? I think they do a good job of that, to kind of toe the line between those, instead of just being like, yeah, he was the best dude in the world. So I was a little worried of that going in. And when I watched it, it's number 11 on my top 30 sports movies of all time after just watching it one time. One spot above The Hustler, which is an all-time classic. So I definitely recommend King Richard. I told my parents to watch it last night, and they did, and they texted me right after and said how great they thought it was. So it's one that I think everyone can watch it. It's accessible to everyone and has a lot to say too.
Yeah, it's streaming free on HBO Max right now, and I will say real quick that basically, I don't want to spoil the moment, but there is a moment in the movie where he kind of explains everything of something that happened in his, youth, that basically explains why he is the way he is now, and it makes sense and explains his character, and it doesn't exactly absolve him of all of the, bad stuff he does, but it at least gives you a reason.
And I've heard, I want to say I haven't seen it yet, but I really want to, but I saw some people that haven't seen the movie, criticizing, you have two of the best tennis players in the world, women tennis players, and you're making a movie about the dad. But this is the movie that the Williams sisters wanted to make. They produced the movie, they were behind it. They wanted to tell the story of their father because they're very grateful for what he did, even if there's some questionable things. But they are where they are because of him. So it's the story they want to tell. So if you're cynical about the reasoning behind the movie, just know that that it's the story they wanted to tell.
And from a story perspective, what's going to make a more interesting movie? This conflicting character and this guy that's made some maybe bad life choices or controversial choices, or these two women who just showed up and dominate essentially from the time they were mid-teenagers until they're mid-30s. And I feel like the movie itself wouldn't have been that interesting if it was from their perspective, because
for sure.
There wouldn't have been very many lows. It would have just been high after high after high, which is great for them in real life, but as far as telling a movie, I don't know how compelling it would have been.
And they do a really good job of telling you the story of the Williams sisters, and both of the actresses. I had to look them up, but Demi Singleton, who plays Serena, and Sania Sidney, who plays Venus, they're both awesome. They have moments as well, and you do get the story of the daughters as well as the fathers. So, I think they do a good job showing, if you just made a biopic of the Williams sisters, like Joe said, you'd basically have a movie that you'd have to focus on them until they're both 14, and then you don't have much of a movie after that, because the whole rest of that is them being the greatest at the sport of all time, basically. So I think they told the most interesting story you could have with their career, and it shows the ups and downs just of them being young and wanting to go pro and feeling like their dad is not letting them, and things like that happen in real life, and they show that really well. And both of those actresses are definitely going to be up and comers if they stick to making movies. The other thing I really liked about it was they filmed the tennis sequences really well. You get a few matches and a few scenes of it, but they recreate history very well. All the tennis is done well, and it makes and it sucks you in. It reminded me of Miracle in that they nailed all the actual hockey scenes, except for maybe Jim Craig's goaltending. But I think they just capture the actual tennis well, and it's not as high paced and fast as hockey is, but they did a good job of filming those sequences whenever they're actually doing it. So that one is probably the most like pleasant surprise of a movie that went into it, thought it would just be kind of your typical like, oh, it's just a sports movie, like it doesn't have really any depth behind it, but it has a lot of depth and it has a lot of good performances. So
and I
recommend that to you even if you aren't interested in any sports.
Yeah, and I know, number one, I know nothing about tennis at all. I don't even know how the scoring works. I've tried to understand it, and it never made sense to me, and I still enjoyed the movie. And I watched John Bernthal. He was on Hot Ones a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about, like, the tennis in this movie, and he trained for, like, he had played tennis before, but he trained extensively, so his form was right, and people that know tennis couldn't watch the movie and be like, oh, his form's terrible. So even for someone who's not the main focus of the movie and is just a tennis coach, they wanted to have him have his like form down and look like a tennis coach. So I'm sure they worked a lot with the actresses that played Venus and Serena and the actresses that were their opponents to make sure that they looked like they could play tennis.
Yeah, I appreciate that as someone who's seen a lot of baseball movies where they clearly don't know any form or anything, pitching and all that stuff. Like it definitely makes a difference when you're watching those scenes to put the work in.
Yeah, that's why I'm curious about the Kurt Warner biopic. That I think there's only one of two ways that can go. Of like, I feel like that movie's either going to be Oscar, like Best Picture Oscar contender, or complete hot garbage. I don't think there's a way that movie is like, oh, it was good, it was solid. I think it's either going to be like arguably best movie of the year or just completely terrible.
One movie I want to talk about that I went into thinking, oh, this is not going to be for me, but I'm sure it's going to be an Oscar contender. And I thought similar to King Richard, I was expecting it to go along really traditional like biopic lines. Was Spencer, the Kristen Stewart Princess Diana movie. And for me going into it, I was like, okay, I don't really care about Princess Diana. I don't particularly care about the royals. I don't know anything really about the story, and I don't have much interest in like these characters as people. But I went into it for Kristen Stewart. I went into it essentially for the buzz of the performance, and I came out of it super, super impressed. I was kind of blown away by it, and I thought it was so much different than just a typical biopic, and I expected it to be kind of along the same beats as something that would just cover like, oh, the most important week of her life and lead right up to her death or something like that. Or it would show us some like the biggest moments of her life or some of the biggest, most famous, iconic things she ever experienced. And it wasn't like that at all. This was just one Christmas weekend with her royal family while she's in the middle of a divorce, while she's going through what is seeming like a very intense depressive episode because of the divorce and all the pressure around her. And she's right in the middle of the center of the public eye, and we're just getting one weekend in her life at that one highly tense moment of her life. And it brings in moments of kind of psychological thriller, almost horror elements to it, where you're kind of really exploring her fear for her future, and she's haunted kind of by this idea that she's not going to be able to ever live a full life because she's entrapped in this cycle of royalty, and she's always afraid that she's going to die young, and she's haunted by this ghost of like the potential death of her and what could happen to her children. And you have this kind of foreboding knowledge of course, that she does die young, and she does kind of have this tragic life, unfortunately. And I thought this was a really strong second movie from this director. I did see Jackie, so I probably should have expected to not have a traditional biopic here, but this was even much less traditional than Jackie, because Jackie was, of course, like the most important moment of Jackie Kennedy's life, arguably. And this was just kind of a weekend, and it got into more of the psychological elements and the mental elements of her as a person, her as kind of like a soul. So yeah, I was really, really impressed by it. Right now, it's my favorite movie of the year, and one that I was not having huge expectations for, but was really, really surprised by and how much I loved it. And for me it's so high that like I don't even know what could come and knock it down looking at the movies ahead of me in the year, but there's always chance for surprises, you know.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to watching that movie. I was a basically how you feel about Spencer is how I felt about Jackie. Was like I have no care to watch a Jackie Kennedy biopic, and then I watched the movie, and it just made me realize like I never thought about the fact that like we look at the assassination of like Kennedy and we're like, oh, the president got shot, and like it's a sad thing, but it's also just kind of because of how long ago it was, and that's just like pretty much even the last 2 or 3 generations just growing up like seeing it basically in history class, we've kind of become desensitized to it. You don't think about the fact she was just riding along in the car and her husband's like head exploded next to her, and it's like what that would do to a person. And I thought it was kind of an interesting movie, different movie, and I was a big fan of it, so I'm definitely
Yeah,
looking forward to
there's a
Spencer.
similar vibe to that with Diana because Princess Diana is such a mythical person that even if you don't follow the royals, you know Princess Diana and you know her death. And I think she's one of those people whose death has overshadowed her entire life. And for this movie, kind of gave us a chance to like see her alive and see her life and the complexities of that life, and that we just see her as this icon, as this person, as this like historical figure. And this was kind of like, no, this was a human being with very complex emotions. And I think it did a great job giving us a portrait of those emotions without being in any way emotionally manipulative. And it doesn't feel like, oh, here's where the music swells and here's where you're supposed to cry and here's where she's going to give her speech. It was very much just like a look into her mind at this moment in time. And I loved it.
All right. I think that kind of brings me to because a lot of people are predicting Kristen Stewart will be nominated for that role. I know she said she doesn't give a shit one way or the other, but I think she has a good chance of being nominated for that just from the buzz I've heard. I haven't seen the film yet. Um, Outside of like if we talked about King Richard, I would be genuinely shocked if Will Smith is not nominated for Best Actor for this upcoming Oscars. Is there anything that you guys have seen, or even just with the buzz around, what would you be genuinely shocked if by the time the Oscars come around, this person or this movie, whether it's special effects, whether it's Best Picture, whether it's any category, what do you think you'd be shocked by if it's not nominated in that category?
All right, because as a degenerate who likes to bet on the Oscars, I've noticed that the Oscar special effects category always goes to basically who can make the not realistic look realistic. Like First Man won, Ex Machina won. I think The Martian won. It never goes to like the Star Wars or like these weird like
Interstellar one.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it never goes to like these big like alien creature special effects movies. And so I will not only be shocked if Dune isn't nominated, I will be shocked if Dune doesn't win. Like
Doesn't
sure
win.
there's like the big
Yeah.
worm monster and stuff, but for the most part it's like ships in the
Mm-hmm.
sand, like very subdued, kind of not over the top special effects, and that is my number
Yeah.
one pick to win the Oscar for special effects this
Yeah,
year.
it looks
Totally
very
agree.
in camera, and that's what they like to see is like, it looks like it really exists there and it's something that could actually happen, not a bunch of aliens like you said. So
Yeah.
yeah, it'd be that's same for me.
Yeah, I'll say when I filled out my list in September for my visual effects, I had Dune as getting nominated and winning. So I definitely think that's going to be up there. Other ones on the list that I had as potentials back in the day was Eternals. I thought that could have potentially had really good effects, and it did have some strong effects, especially in the larger scale kind of villains. But I don't maybe a nomination, but yeah, not going to outshine Dune. Godzilla versus Kong maybe
Mhm.
that had some
Yeah.
I was
really
gonna say
That'll get
impressive
nominated,
visuals.
but Dune will beat it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Godzilla versus Kong. I wouldn't be shocked if it's not nominated, partly just because it's not like your typical Oscar movie, but the special effects category is not usually the
No.
typical Oscar movies, and there hasn't been. What would surprise me if Kong versus Godzilla is not nominated for that is outside of Dune, there honestly haven't been a lot of big like sci-fi movies with a lot of special effects that it focuses on. Um, Other than like you said, Eternals. Um, I think Candyman had a lot of interesting special effects. Shang-Chi might get nominated, but I don't think it should. Because I think that was maybe the weakest part of the movie where it's actual special effects. There are scenes like, especially like when like note when you see something and it's super noticeable. I think the Academy sees that too, and he's in Shang-Chi during the bus fight when he rolls over the top of the bus. He's so disproportionate to the bus, and I thought that was something that stood out to me. So yeah, like I think Godzilla versus Kong and Dune are pretty much locks for best special effects, and I'd be interested to see what ends up getting nominated outside of those, because
Any
those
chance,
are typically more like blockbustery type movies. But maybe No
I
Time to Die. I like
any
what
chance
else has
Last
come
Night in
out?
Soho? There are some special effects,
It
and
shouldn't.
I could see them. They'll
I
a lot of times they'll use those categories to nominate, like, oh, we like this movie, but it's not quite like Best Picture potential.
Yeah.
That's why, like, Dune will especially with 10, I could see Dune getting that Best Picture nomination, but it has no chance of winning. So I could see them being like,
Yeah.
oh, well, we'll give it special effects, or we'll give it cinematography, or we'll give it this, and I could see
It'll
last.
get best adapted screenplay and special effects nominations for sure.
Yeah.
Might win both. Depends. I don't know what else would be nominated for adapted screenplay. Probably whatever the fuck Shakespeare movie with Denzel
Yeah.
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
If In the Heights does end up getting any buzz, that's technically an adapted from the
That's true,
Broadway.
too.
That's one that I can see them, if it doesn't get a lot of Oscar love in the main categories, I think they'll give it like costume design. And they could even throw it into special effects, because there's some really, really cool shots they do that are definitely special effects near the end of the movie. And then there's a video that shows the 96,000 video, what it looked like kind of before and after that scene. So I could see them giving that some love there if it doesn't get nominated in like the main categories, because it was kind of a loved critically movie.
Yeah, if we're talking musicals, I think West Side Story has a good shot at getting some of these nominations, especially in the visual effects and the sound editing and that kind of stuff. I think depending on like the scope of the sequences and that kind of stuff, if they go for that similar scale of larger than life dance sequences, and there's no reason to think that West Side Story wouldn't have big elaborate dance sequences, knowing the source material, both the movie and obviously the musical. But yeah, I could see that kind of going and eating the pie of In the Heights coming out right at the end of the year and being like, oh, look at us, we're a big showing musical, we got Steven Spielberg on us. So I think that could, regardless of the quality of the movie, obviously I haven't seen it yet, but I think that's striking at a lot of those Academy kind of buttons, and could be one that gets a ton of nominations, and one that could be one to place your bets on if you're one of those guys who bets on the Oscars.
Right. Yeah. I obviously haven't seen it yet because it hasn't come out, but The Tragedy of Macbeth, I think, is going to get nominated in as many categories as the Oscars can give it. I think that is almost a lock for, depending on if it comes out and people aren't into it, but I think it will be a movie that critics like, and I think it's got some buzz just from, early releases. Yeah. Denzel is going to get a nomination. Frances McDormand, whatever movie she puts out, even if it's undeservingly, she's going to get a nomination and probably win, like Nomadland. And Joel Coen's the director, so I think that's going to get probably, Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Actor, Best either Actress or Supporting Actress, whatever they decide Frances McDormand is. And having not seen it yet, I think that's a lock for those. But I will say I would be genuinely surprised if I was just looking at my list. We talked about, like, I really want Winston Duke and Nick Cage, one or the other, to be nominated. But I would be probably genuinely shocked if, what was I looking at here? Here's one. I would be genuinely shocked if The Green Knight doesn't get nominated for costume design or makeup, because that movie has the best of the year in terms of those. And I don't know what else has come out that you've really been like, oh, the makeup in that movie is great. But I think that has the best, like, practical.
Didn't they combine
of that?
They
combined them, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
And I could see
the same thing now.
I could see Cruella getting a costume nomination as well.
Yeah,
I could see House of Gucci as well. That has a lot of really vibrant costumes, but the reviews have not been great.
The reviews for that have been not great. So I could see that movie just kind of coming out with nothing.
But hey, the Suicide Squad won makeup and hairstyling, so House of Gucci could come in and be the one that gets it despite quality. Eyes of Tammy Faye really transformed.
Probably win just because of Jared Leto. not looking like himself.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
few that are like these transformative rules. I think Spencer could get it if really. It's not very showy though, and I think this category does tend to go for like the most makeup, the one that does a big transformative role. Maybe Eyes of Tammy Faye, that did a really transformative role on Bryce Dallas Howard, but that hasn't been getting as much buzz since it came out. I could see Being the Ricardos, the Lucy
Oh
Ricardo
yeah.
biopic.
Yeah.
That could be one that gets a lot of
Mhm.
like Academy love.
I've only
I can
seen
see
one
that.
review of it, and it was super positive. So
Yeah, I liked the trailer. Some people thought they didn't like it as much. I thought it looked really good, but that like you mentioned, Tristan House of Gucci, that movie itself is getting mixed reviews. Like I think it's sitting at like 66%. But even the people that didn't like the movie, the critics are still saying that Lady Gaga and Adam Driver are fantastic. And then people are hit or miss on whether they like Jared Leto. They either say he's amazing or he's terrible.
Yeah.
So I think that performance-wise, Lady Gaga, maybe Adam Driver too, but Lady Gaga could get a look at a nomination because she did not get nominated for A Star Is Born, right? She just the song.
I don't think so. I think
Yeah,
just the song did.
So I think her
Bradley
coming back
Cooper
and having
did.
another
Did Bradley Cooper get nominated? I think
I
he might
think
have.
as a
he might-
director,
But I don't think Lady Gaga
I
did.
think maybe, yeah, but basically that movie, everyone thought she was and she didn't, and a lot of times when that happens, and then another movie comes out, the next one, that she's in, and she gets a lot of Oscar buzz, I could see her getting nominated, kind of because of that.
I'm really looking forward to when these nominate all these movies start coming out because so many of these Oscar movies like Belfast. Have any of you guys seen Belfast? That one came out and had a ton of Oscar buzz, but I haven't gotten a chance to see it yet. That's one that I think could sneak in
Yeah.
for a lot of Academy
no, I
love.
haven't yet.
I haven't. I don't know where that's available right now, other than like maybe in some theaters.
I'll look and see.
But having a puppy with super severe anxiety whenever we leave him, separation anxiety, that's the word I was looking for. That prevents me from really going to the movies right now. So I think Belfast is a lock for a Best Picture at least, and I don't know what else. But just from what I've heard and from like that was a festival darling, I think that one will be nominated for sure for multiple categories. Two movies that I kind of want to bring up because I know at least three of us have seen them, and we haven't really talked about them. The first one is one Joe just mentioned for special effects, possibly, is The Last Night in Soho. I watched it recently. Tristan's seen it, and Joe was the highest on us. So I want to hear just Joe's kind of your thoughts on Last Night in Soho. Everything you said kind of worked for you. What are your thoughts and feelings after seeing Last Night in Soho?
I really liked it a lot. I probably could have brought that one up when we were talking about movies that we didn't have big expectations for, but it really surprised us. But I wanted to throw out some love for Ghostbusters Afterlife because I knew that'd probably be the only point to talk about that one. But I liked it a lot. I really liked a lot of the performances. I like basically it cuts back and forth between present day and the 1960s, and I thought it did that very well. Both eras felt like you were in the same place, but just different points in time, and I thought Edgar Wright did a really good job of capturing that. And I also just like the vibe throughout the entire movie and all of the reveals and stuff throughout, to me, really worked. I could understand if maybe they didn't work for other people, but they did for me. And even just like some of the subplots didn't quite come together. Like I think it could have been better, and I think so far I don't know what it is. But I feel like I haven't seen what's going to end up being my number one movie of the year. I doubt it. Right now it is Last Night in Soho, but I doubt it stays that way. Whether it's Spencer, Nightmare Alley, or even a movie I don't expect at all, like Belfast, to come in and take over as my number one. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now. It's just like a lot of the various aspects and the writing and stuff worked for me. I don't know what it could get come nomination time. I could see it, getting blanked and just come back with 0 nominations, but I could also see it kind of sneak in and maybe get like a special effects nomination or a costume design or whatever nomination at the end of it. I don't expect to see it probably for Best Picture because it's not getting any of that type of buzz, but we'll see.
Yeah, I could see possibly an Oscar nomination for either Thomasin McKenzie or Anya Taylor-Joy. I don't know if they have enough in the movie to like really be showy to give you those. And it is at the end of the day kind of a horror movie, and those kind of get overlooked by the Oscars. But yeah, that one I think if anything, maybe screenplay gets nominated for that one at the very least. But I think that has some shots at Oscar stuff, even though I wasn't as into it as you were. My thoughts and feelings on Last Night in Soho were summarized very well by, I'll bring it up again, I Think You Should Leave, the best show on Netflix. There's a skit where it's a play on Walk Hard, or it's not Walk Hard, Walk the Line, where the guy behind the glass and this band is performing, and he says, no one likes gospel, like that's what everyone's playing now, we want to hear something different. So then the guy strings up a tune, he says, you want something different, and he starts singing, and the producer behind the glass is really into it, and it's The Day That Robert Patton Shot Me Down, and it's very similar to like a Johnny Cash song, and the producer behind the glass is looking and he's super into it. And then all of a sudden Tim Robinson joins in because the guy says, follow my lead, and he jumps in and starts singing, well, it was also the day the skeletons came to life, and said, and just the whole skit is this good song, and then Tim Robinson singing about worms and zombies, and the skeletons came to life. And at the end, he's like, what the hell were you doing, man? Like, he liked what I was doing, and he's like, I thought he asked for something spooky. That is my thoughts and feelings on Last Night in Soho. It felt like a movie that I would have been super into, and told the right story, and it had every beat that I was looking for. And then someone took a note and said, make it spooky. And then they made it a horror movie, because none of the horror aspects really worked for me, but everything else did. So I was so drawn, like back and forth the whole time of like, I really love this. Like I love everything of Thomas and Mackenzie going to the past, and the mirror stuff with her and Anya Taylor-Joy was amazing. And then as soon as it started being a horror movie, I was like, none of this works for me. It doesn't make sense to the rest of the movie. I don't understand what's happening here. That is my best analogy for my thoughts on Last Night in Soho. Tristan, you weren't as into it as me. All right, you weren't as into it as Joe. Like me, you had similar thoughts and feelings, I think. But what were your genuine like reactions to Last Night in Soho?
Yeah, after hearing that, I think I was into it more than you were a bit, Johnny. Probably in the middle of between the you guys. I wasn't as enamored with it as Joe was. I think I love the style of it, and I love that it didn't immediately blast you with Edgar Wright kind of overbearing, really loud style right from the beginning. Like it starts you out with this very traditional story of this girl going out to Paris on this whim that she wants to go to this fashion school and follow her dreams as a fashion designer. And
London,
I'm sorry, and London, of course, because it's Soho. And but she's going to London on this dream, and then it kind of slowly turns sour, and it becomes not what she expected, and she starts to wonder, oh, should I have gone home? And she moves into this apartment by herself and starts to see these kind of visions of the past. And I really liked the setup of this. I thought the whole first act was really fascinating, and I was really getting into it. And as the horror was building, I thought it was really a nice touch from Edgar Wright that as the horror built, he gave more and more of his personal style to it. So as she was losing her touch on reality, it was becoming more and more of like an Edgar Wright, zany, loud, kind of jumpy movie. So you're kind of losing touch on the tracking of the story as much as she is too. So it really kind of put you in the head of the character. So I like the subjectivity of that filmmaking. But I thought ultimately the story and the themes of the movie got really lost. I don't want to spoil how the movie ultimately plays out with the twist and things like that, but he's trying to make this statement about like the role that women play in especially in like the Hollywood in the art scene. He's saying, oh, they're put in these roles, they can't really be themselves, they can't really add complexity, they just got to play these roles that men provide for them. And then in his own movie, it feels like every female character is this very one-dimensional character. Like he doesn't seem to say that Hollywood is wrong for that portrayal. Like he has these side characters that are, oh, the mean girl, and then like the ditzies that follow her around and are like, oh, you're so smart and cool. And I was thinking like, oh, surely in this type of movie that's very trying to be feminist and trying to say like, oh, women are more than movies make them out to be, we're going to in the end see that these girls are more than we see them in the first scene. But then in the last scene, they're exactly the same as they were in the first scene. And I was just like, well, that's a missed opportunity here. And I feel like the movie just felt like a a good amount of missed opportunities and the good ideas that he kind of tried to splat at the wall that he never quite figured out what to do with. So a really strong setup, with a lot of ideas that he tries to throw into it. And by the end, I was just kind of confused of what he was trying to say with the movie at all. But
Yeah.
definitely entertaining. I had a better time with it than I think Johnny did.
I had a good time with it because the performances were engaging. I thought Thomasin McKenzie and Anya Taylor-Joy were both so captivating every time they were on screen that I was really into everything they did. I'm a sucker for anything that Diana Rigg is in. Obviously, shout out to On Her Majesty's Secret Service. So I was happy to see that she was the old lady who owned the apartment. But yeah, I had a lot of fun like guessing like what was going to come next. I thought some of it was predictable, but some of it went in directions that I didn't expect. So I liked that. So there was definitely aspects that I really liked, but I just thought overall I agree with Tristan of like the first 15 minutes of the movie when it's her adjusting to London and these girls being mean girls. I thought that was like unbearable. I thought those I can't stand movies that are written that are so clearly written by like old out of touch men that are trying to be written for young people that I was just like none of this writing is believable. Nothing of what these characters are saying is actually what they'd say or do in these scenarios. But I was happy when that got like that went away and then the rest of the movie is not like that. Everything else is really good and well acted and pretty well written, but I just didn't see the horror aspects of it didn't work for me as far as the story that it was trying to tell. I think it just kind of instead of like what it should have done was really push along what the movie was trying to say. I thought having that horror stuff just distracted from the actual message of the film. So I ended up in the same place Tristan did of I don't know what this movie was trying to tell me or say or, you know, bring in anything new. I think like I mentioned this in our group chat after I watched it, but I think it would be more effective maybe for me if Promising Young Woman didn't do everything better like
Yep.
so recently of the story that it was telling. Because that really came across as, you know, we're getting this message through and we're going to hammer it to you, but it'll still be a good movie. I think this tried to do something a little similar, but just didn't work. And I think some of that is Promising Young Woman was made by a female and told from a female perspective, and that's who directed the film. And this was told by a man, and he can, you know, we can be as you know supportive of women as we can and stuff like that, but we don't know that perspective. And I think that kind of hindered the movie. I think it would have been stronger if Edgar Wright pitched this and then a different director, maybe a female director, took over and told that story. I think it would have come across a little more genuine than it did. It just kind of felt like to me disingenuous what it was trying to actually tell. And I mean, at the end of the day, like I'd give this a fresh review on Rotten Tomatoes, but it'd be like a 3 out of 5 instead of like a 5 out of 5. Definitely fresh. That sounds like more of like where Joe was with it. But I recommend it. Like I think people should check it out. I think Bobby would like it. I think he might be
Yeah.
more into it than I was, but I don't know if you're going to be as high on it as Joe was. I think you're going
Yeah.
to fall more in between, maybe where Tristan. I mean, Tristan and I sound a little harder on it, but I'm probably right around the same. Like if Tristan and I rated it, it'd probably be right around the same thing. But I think Bobby might be more in between us and Joe.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I do want to see it. I'm a fan of Edgar Wright. I like most of his movies quite a bit. So I'd like to see his kind of foray into horror. But it looked good. I mean, at least the trailers, like it made it look interesting and stylish and very much of what I would expect Edgar Wright to do. So I want to see it, and I'd be curious to see how it ranks. But my expectations for it are probably, you know, it's a middle of the pack. Like there's good and there's bad, but it depends on where it hits you. Like if the story strikes you well, then it's gonna be, you know, and like you said, the message, Tristan, where you think it gets muddled. If that hits you better, then you're gonna like it a lot more, I think. So I'm curious to see.
And for me, I think with a lot of movies, like for whatever reason, I have the unfortunate talent of being able to predict like reveals and twists into movies. Like with Arrival, like 10 minutes into the movie, I realized what the reveal was going to be. In The Accountant, same thing. Like 20, 30 minutes in, I'm like, oh, I figured that out. And with this, if a movie can be a step ahead of me until they actually want me to know the reveal, it always um, if a reveal can surprise me and catch me off guard, I tend to enjoy a movie more. And this one, I thought I knew where it was going, and then they hit me with the reveal, and I was like, oh, I was way off on that one. So
Yeah, I think it did, that is probably my favorite thing that this one did is it kept you guessing throughout. I don't think, I mean, I think some of the stuff like Joseph, like I like trying to figure out the movie before the actual twist. Like I just watched Old, and I was kind of trying to do that the whole time. Shout out to Old. It was better than I expected. It didn't blow me away, but I had a lot of fun with it. But sorry, yeah, with Last Night in Soho, it has some stuff that I guessed and some stuff that I had no idea what was coming. So I kind of liked figuring some of the stuff out, feeling like I was ahead of the movie, and then the movie goes in certain directions and you don't exactly see it coming. So I like that aspect of it. So it's definitely a fun watch. I don't think it doesn't have as much depth as it tries to have, so it brings it down for me for that. But it's definitely worth a watch. The other movie that I wanted to bring up, I think the only other person here who's seen it is Tristan, but one of my favorite movies of the year so far was The Green Knight. It was one that, again, like kind of a critical darling, but I haven't seen a lot of buzz around it, especially with like Oscar stuff coming up. But I really thought Dev Patel is worthy of an Oscar nomination for this, and I thought, like I said, like it's some of the best practical like makeup and stuff like that. So I think that is a category that it should be nominated, but I think it's a kind of a dark horse for David Lowery to be possibly nominated for Best Director because I think he should. But Tristan, what were your thoughts on The Green Knight? Because as much as I liked it, I think you were even higher on it than me.
Yeah, I absolutely love The Green Knight. David Lowery is one of those directors that he'll do a ghost story, this really kind of like artsy abstract movie, and then he'll do something like super studio. So you never really know what to expect going in, and this kind of I think bridges the middle of both. You know, this is not as nearly to the level of Ghost Story where you don't know what's going on and it's all about like, oh, it's a poem, it's a tone, it's this and that. And this actually has a through line, a plot with characters that like go from A to B and you can figure out what's happening as you're watching it. So I think this kind of shows his ambition that he showed in Ghost Story, but also a lot of his more realistic kind of okay, what I want people to actually watch this kind of thing. So it follows this character who's a knight from King Arthur's table, and he's on this quest to prove himself and to hunt down this green knight that only appears on Christmas. So he kind of goes across, uh, the wilderness and on the hunt for this green knight. And we follow not just his journey and who he meets along the way, but also kind of his mental state and the exploration of. We mentioned a bit earlier how like Last Night in Soho tries to, you know, a lot of movies on this list honestly try to explore like toxic masculinity and like the perspective of that. And I think this tackles that really well. I think this brings on like what is the mindset of someone who goes off and does this big glorious mission to prove himself as the best thing of all time. And like in the beginning of the movie, before he goes off on this mission, he's kind of just slacking around and laying around and kind of just doing nothing. And he's like, well, I don't need to really do that much work because eventually I'm just going to be the best of all time because I'm going to go hunt down the Green Knight. And it's like he has this entitlement to himself that he has this one mission and that's all he has to do. And I love that movie kind of dives into the trippiness of that with really strange visuals, but also had like a through line of a story and an adventure to it and action and kind of thrills. And so I think it appeals to both kind of demographics of the artsy kind of guy and also kind of the studio kind of guy. So I think this potentially I don't know if it did great in the box office, but this definitely had a conversation around it. And I think it's one that could be like one of your, if you're not quite into the RC movies, this could be one that you watch that could kind of introduce you to some of the ideas and some of the themes without actually having you like dive into anything crazy.
Yeah, I never checked out A Ghost Story, but I know Tristan really likes that. But after seeing The Green Knight, I'm really interested to check out David Lowery's other work, so I'm definitely going to watch that. I don't know if it's free on streaming, so I'll probably wait for it to be. But yeah, I agree. I just think it's super fun. Like it's not exactly the most fun tone, but you have a lot of fun watching it, and it has really good performances. All the side characters that it introduces are really good. I thought I'm blanking on her name, but the girl that was in Falcon and the Winter Soldier has a small role in this, and she's awesome in
Solo.
it. And Solo, yeah, Erin Kellyman. She's great. She's in one scene, and it's one of my favorite scenes of the whole movie. I thought she was really good. Um, so I highly recommend The Green Knight. I think it's one, like Tristan said, like even if you aren't super into kind of indie movies and movies that don't tell your typical like through line type of movies, this is a good one for you to kind of break you into that. You know, watch The Green Knight and then check out The Lighthouse. You know, don't watch The Lighthouse first because you might be super confused and not know what's happening the whole time. But I think this is a good one for that. And I know Bobby would like it, and I think Joe would like it as well. So you guys should definitely watch that.
Yeah.
Bobby, I have the Blu-ray. If you want me to bring it to Thanksgiving, you can borrow it.
If you own any movies you think I would want to see, bring it to Thanksgiving.
I will say too,
sure.
if you enjoyed The Green Knight and you want to watch a ghost story, it is on a little-known streaming service you might have heard called Netflix. So.
Oh hell yeah, it's on Netflix. I didn't even know that. Netflix has the worst like actual homepage to find anything you're interested in, so I never actually search for movies on there. But it's
People
just
complain about the HBO app, but I feel like Netflix is like the least user-friendly app on the face of the earth. Like it's impossible to find
100%.
anything interesting.
Yeah, Amazon Prime is my go-to because that one is the one that I find movies on the easiest. But half the time I end up renting something on Amazon Prime, then realizing it's free on another streaming service. So before we end things, I just want to go around and see what's a movie maybe we haven't brought up that you'd like to give a shout out to or have a quick discussion about, and then we'll kind of end it because we kind of did our Oscar predictions as best we could with like movies we'd be surprised if they don't. I do think Dune is a lock for a Best Picture nomination, and I do agree with Bobby. The one that I it wouldn't shock me, so I didn't bring it up, but I'd be surprised if Rebecca Ferguson doesn't get a Best Supporting Actress nomination, as Bobby mentioned. So, Bobby, anything that you've seen, because we've kind of talked about some of the indie movies, anything that you watched this year that we haven't brought up that you enjoyed or just want to kind of see what everyone else thinks about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's only a couple on my list that we haven't actually brought up at least briefly, but I liked Shang-Chi a lot. That's one we kind of touched on a little bit. Like you said, I think before it gets a little bit too kind of CG heavy at the end, it's a lot better, but I still did enjoy the ending and the way it didn't fall into the Black Panther third act for me. Like I still really did enjoy the fight at the end and kind of the mystical things they bring in. So I thought that was good. We didn't bring up, even though we had a very long discussion on this movie before, Zack Snyder's Justice League. I really did enjoy that. Way more than I thought I would. And I know Tristan and I are a lot higher on that than Johnny and Joe.
Yeah, that movie sucked.
Definitely.
It was adequate, but 4 hours of it makes it worse.
It's no Space Jam.
Yeah, it is no Space Jam.
Yeah, I mean we touched on most of the other ones that I really enjoyed. I mean, I think some of my favorites of the year would be like Dune, No Time to Die. I really liked In the Heights, and that. So I want to catch up on a lot of the movies that you guys have been talking about, but I think that's pretty much all I have for as far as 2021 movies right now.
Yeah, I think like I said, I don't know. I feel like does Jen like a good Western? You ever watched a Western with her?
It depends. If it's an old school Western, probably more than some of the grittier new ones. Like she'd probably enjoy more John Wayne Westerns.
Got it. So I super recommend. I think you two should watch News of the World for sure.
Okay.
That's one that we haven't really talked about, but I was pleasantly surprised by. Everyone I've ever talked to about that movie said, "Oh, it's boring," and then I watched it and I was like, "How the fuck is this movie boring? Like, it's actually more fast paced than I expected." Tom Hanks is great in it. It's great to see him in a Western, and the little girl in the movie is incredible. I think you and Jen would really like that, and that's for free on HBO Max. But then if you want to rent a movie, I think both of you would like Old Henry a lot. That's one I brought up, but I think that's one that you two could watch together for sure. But the one that I just want to kind of give a shout out to, because we have talked about it a little bit in our previous shows, but I feel like because so many movies have come out since, no one's really talking about Mortal Kombat anymore. Mortal Kombat was so much fun. Like, I get that it's not a very well directed film and it's got some issues and people kind of hate on it a little bit. Like, but if you like Mortal Kombat the game, you're gonna like the movie. I think it had a lot of great moments. Yeah, the lead character is probably the worst part of the film, and that's an issue. But everything else in it, everything with Scorpion and Sub Zero is awesome. I love the fight sequences. So I I think Mortal Kombat I'm higher on than most people are because I just have such a deep connection to the franchise. But I'm so excited. I really hope they make a second one, and I think it could be so much better than the first one. It could actually be like an actual movie that people talk about as a legitimate great action movie if they go forward with the direction they went. They kind of introduced a lot of stuff in this one, and it does have some lulls. But if you go into the next one and it just brings in more and more characters, like fucking check out Mortal Kombat if you haven't seen it and you like a good, a solid action movie with some good fight scenes. And the other action movie that I think is something that no one really talks about was The Wrath of Man. I'm not that big on Jason Statham movies as a whole, but I thought that was probably my favorite Jason Statham movie, and Guy Ritchie's hit or miss, but it was the best movie I've seen from Guy Ritchie since Snatch. So I really liked both of those. If you like a good action flick, as well as Nobody. If you watch Pig and you're disappointed you didn't get your John Wick ripoff, then go check out Nobody because that's exactly what it is, and it does it pretty well. Shout out to Christopher Lloyd because he's the most fun part of that movie. Joe, anything you've seen this year that we haven't talked about that either maybe it's the worst movie you've seen or a great movie that you just think
well, if you want to hear about the worst movie I've seen, go watch our Disney Plus weekly review for Disney Plus Day, and you'll hear me talk about Home Sweet Home Alone, which I will say is the best possible version of a direct to Disney Plus Home Alone remake, but that is a very, very low ceiling. However, a movie I do want to talk about that we haven't touched on. One of the things we were bringing up is locks for nominations. I talked about Mitchell's versus the Machines, which I think hopefully will be a lock for Best Animated Picture, and another movie I think is a lock along with Luca, but Luca's only going to get nominated because it's a Pixar movie and not the actual quality of the film. But Raya and the Last Dragon, which came out at the beginning of the year, is a really, really good Disney animated movie set kind of in a post-apocalyptic world. At the end, there's the prologue in the beginning, and then after that, it's like this post-apocalyptic world of this girl trying to save her kingdom, and it's voiced by Kelly Marie Tran, and she has her dragon companion voiced by Aquafina, and it's just a really fun movie that I enjoyed quite a bit. And I would say, if you're a fan of animated movies or if you have kids, definitely check out Raya and the Last Dragon.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really liked Raya and the Last Dragon. I think that would be a lock for my favorite animated movie of the year if Mitchell's versus the Machines didn't come out. And I think I wouldn't be surprised. Like Mitchell's versus the Machines, there's no reason that should not win Best Animated Film. But I think if Raya and the Last Dragon wins, it's just because that has the Disney money behind it and it has more of a push and more people will probably see it. But Netflix still has a budget too, so I think
Netflix really doesn't have a live action movie to push, so I could see them just going all in on Mitchell's versus the Machines for animation.
Well, the movie we haven't really discussed that's coming out is The Power of the Dog. I think Tristan is the only one of us who's seen it, but I think that's another one that Benedict Cumberbatch seems like a lock at this point for Best Actor nomination, and that film is going to get Oscar buzz, and that's going to be Netflix's big film to shoot for sure. I think so. But between that and everything else they've done, it's Mitchell's versus the Machines and Power of the Dog are their two Oscar movies.
Yeah, I can talk for a second about Power of the Dog. I think it definitely is going to be a big Oscar movie. It had a lot of Oscar buzz going in. Jane Campion is a really big name among like the indie film crowd, and she only makes movies like a handful of times, like every couple of years. One of those kind of directors where so when she comes back, it always feels like an event, and this feels like one that reached beyond like the Criterion Collection buying crowd and into like the actual people who talk about movies and like critics and stuff like that. So it feels like something that could actually have some impact. And yeah, the performances, especially Benedict Cumberbatch, but I think you can see a lot of supporting love out here too. Jesse Plemons is very good in it. Kristen Dunst is very good in it. But the star of the show is definitely Cumberbatch, and he plays this kind of cowboy, this dirty cowboy role really well. And talk about westerns, this is definitely like a neo western. And where Harder They Fall had this kind of larger than life fun element to it, this is the opposite. It's like the lonely, isolationist, like kind of existential dread of the West type of movie, and that's a little bit more of my speed of a western, I guess. Where like you're living in a place you probably should not be in as a human being, and like what does that do to your soul, type of movie.
Yeah.
And I think this was a great one. And I think Netflix also has another movie to push, one that we didn't talk about in here, but one that I had pretty high on my list is Passing. Uh, Rebecca
Oh, yeah.
Hall, I think, has an outside shot at a director nomination here. It's her first time directing. She's obviously been an actress for a while, but this is her directorial debut. And for her first movie, I was shocked by how well directed it is. Like, I don't think the movie itself is going to blow a lot of people away story-wise or anything like that, but I think it's a black and white movie. It's shot to kind of look like a movie that came out back in the 1950s in a way, because the story is set in that era, and it's about a black woman who runs into one of her friends from school who is also a black woman but is now living as a white woman. You know, she's kind of lightened her skin and is living in society as if she's white, and is blended in and is now passing as a white person. And it gets into the complexity of that relationship and like the complexities of race, and where is the line of that divide? Like, what is the divide between a black person and a white person? And in the reality of biology, there's not really a line at all. It's just one that society has deemed somewhere, you know. And it kind of ask the questions without giving any answers of where that line is. And I think that's going to be troubling for people who want a complete answer. But similar to the book, it's very ambiguous. And I think the direction could be one that gets a lot of love. I think Ruth Negga could be a supporting actress potential nomination. I think this could be one that gets some Academy love, especially in the nomination side. So those are going to be Netflix's two big drama pushes, I think.
Yeah, I forgot about Passing, and that's on my watch list. I got to check that out, and I probably will soon, because I want to see a bunch of 2021 films, and that's obviously available on Netflix without any extra purchases like some of the Amazon or Disney Plus type stuff. I will say, just before we sign off, because I haven't really, I brought it up because Winston Duke should be nominated for Best Actor, but I don't think he will. I watched 9 Days yesterday, and it's a masterpiece. I think it's a movie that it's not going to work for everyone, because it doesn't have your typical flow of like what everyone is looking for in a movie, but it's one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen, in terms of just the story that it's telling, the performances that it has, the love of that it just shows through the characters, and questions about humanity and the world as a whole. I think 9 Days is such a unique, really creative film. It's my favorite sci-fi film since Ex Machina, and that one is one I'd recommend to anyone. I think everyone on this podcast would really like it. So 9 Days, check it out. It's still, I think, like $20 to rent on Amazon Prime, but it's totally worth it. And it's a movie that you can watch with anyone. And I think, if someone's not a huge movie person, maybe they get bored by it because it's not like fast paced and there's not a lot of actual like action or stuff that happens, but it's just one of the most well written, well directed, great looking and well acted movies that I've seen in a while. So check out 9 Days. I saw the trailer and I was intrigued, and I watched the movie and I was blown away. So 9 Days right now is sitting at my number one of the year, and I want people to check that out for sure.
Johnny, have you seen Defending Your Life? Because I was just looking at the plot of it, and it's similar. It sounds similar yet different than that. I wondered if there was any similarity to that and like tone of the movie or anything. But
to what film? Sorry.
Defending Your Life. Well, because this one, it's basically the plot according to Google is 9 souls are interviewed, and like one of them will get put into a body. Where Defending Your Life is Albert Brooks' movie. He's just died. It's got Meryl Streep in it, and it's basically like, here's all the clips from your life, or like important moments of your life, and you have to like defend your clips and explain like why you should get into heaven.
Okay, so yeah, I just that I've never heard of it, but I want to check it out. I'd say, just looking at the premise of Defending Your Life, the biggest difference for this is these people aren't put on trial. They're not judged based on things they've done or haven't done. It's, what do you observe about life? watching other people live, what do you think of Earth? What are your biggest takeaways? What is your strengths and weaknesses as a person and as an individual based on solely observations about life that you've never lived? I think that stuff is more probably in depth than something, that Defending Your Life probably brought up. But I do want to check that out now, and I'm adding it to my watch list because I've never heard of that movie. But I love Albert Brooks, so I got to check that out for sure.
One movie this year that I want to recommend quickly before we stop is Shiva Baby. It's in my top 10 of the year, but it's definitely going to go really under the radar of most people. So I wanted to bring it up. We talked a lot about first-time directors today, honestly, but this is from Emma Seligman. She's done like short films, never heard of her before, but this was her first feature based on a short film she made of the same name, and follows this college student who's like in the middle of her finals, and she leaves school to go to a Shiva, which is like a party you have after a funeral when you're Jewish. So she's going to this big family party for her Shiva, not her Shiva, but for a Shiva. And it's kind of, we mentioned earlier, like Good Time and Uncut Gems, where it has this like uncut anxiety, like this constant tension. It's very loud, and it's kind of like you're always in this character's head, and it's not quite a likable character, but like you enjoy watching them be unlikable in some ways. Like they're just terrible to people around them in some ways, but they're fun to watch, and you relate to their anxiety, and it really gets you into the head of this character. And I thought it was a really great debut from that director, and I'm really curious to see what she'll do next. I think if this kind of puts her on the radar, it could be one that takes off among the film scene. So it's free on HBO, and it's like less than 90 minutes. I think so. It's easy to get through, and it's just essentially she goes to this party and she's very overwhelmed with her life, and she's right at the end of college, not quite sure what to do next with her life. She just recently went through a breakup, so she's kind of lost with that too. And of course, her ex is at the party because everybody always comes to the Shiva, so it's like your whole family, all your friends are all there, and she's kind of dealing with all these people who are asking her questions, oh, what are you doing next? What's up for you after school? And what's your career plans? And what happened to that girl you were seeing? And, oh, are you seeing someone now? And it's kind of like the constant growing anxiety of that experience is something that this movie did a great job portraying. So I'll put that on my list for sure, of one that I think people need to watch.
Yeah, that's one. I watched the trailer, and you feel the anxiety and the tension just from the trailer. So that's one I'm definitely going to check out soon, maybe tonight. So with that, I don't know if anyone else has final words, any final movies, anything we brought up that you want to recommend, but otherwise I think we've said everything we need to say about 2021.
All right, yeah. Check out the movies we recommended. If we recommended a movie, if you heard of a movie for the first time because of us and you watch it and you like it, tweet at us at Movie Changeup or any of our individual handles. Or if we recommended a movie and you thought it sucked, just keep that opinion to yourself. I don't need your negativity in my life. So
come at me.
Yeah.
Send it to Johnny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you watch any of these and you don't like it, and it's not one that I said I don't like, come at me. Or if you like a movie and I don't, like Arrival, tweet at me because I'll fight you.
Johnny's always got to pull out a bad take randomly at the end of the episode.
All right. Without further ado,
Not a fan of Arrival either.
goodbye.